Thank you all for coming. I'd like to welcome everybody to the strategic planning session for the City Council of Sterling Heights, January 25th, 2022. Can we please all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance? And then we will remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ms. Riska. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor, Mrs. Sarowski,
Here.
Mrs. Koski,
Present.
Mr. Radke, Mrs. Schmidt,
Present.
Mr. Yanis, and Mrs. Yarko.
Okay, thank you. Council, could we please have the approval of the agenda?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Ms. Koski?
move to approve the agenda.
Support. The motion has been moved and supported. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And thank you. Before we begin, as you may have noticed, we are missing Mayor Taylor today due to a personal illness. So I will be chairing the meeting until 1:30, in which case I need to leave for a business requirement. So at that time, Council, I would need and entertain a motion to appoint a temporary mayor that will chair the remainder of this meeting. So we will address that at that time. And now we are ready for the report from the city manager, Mark Vanderpool.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski. I am very pleased to kick off our annual strategic planning session today. This is an exciting day for us. It gives us a chance to look at a number of initiatives from a 30,000-foot level, if you will, a macro perspective, and start to plan for the forthcoming year and years ahead. Strategic planning isn't just a prelude to the forthcoming budget. It's a look ahead for the next couple of years, and in some cases even longer when we start talking about visioning 2040. Strategic planning affords the City Council the opportunity to engage in these items and bring up ideas, initiatives that are not on the agenda that perhaps we haven't thought of as an administration. Of course, throughout the year, there are so many ways that we engage with the City Council and with the community, and that includes certainly, as I mentioned, the budget hearing process. It includes the twice-a-month City Council meetings and surveying the community for feedback. We just completed our recent community survey, and then as the City Council knows, we have engagement throughout the year on initiatives like ARPA, which we're going to be talking about today, where we engage with the community as well. So there's so many ways that we get feedback from the City Council and the community and collaborate, but strategic planning is a format that helps bring it all together as well. So I did want to mention that we have all of our directors here today that are going to help guide us through the process as well. So you'll be hearing from them throughout the day. The good news is we have a number of breaks throughout the day, including lunch. That will help the process go a little smoother. The meeting is, of course, televised live. Residents can see this anywhere they can get an internet connection or have cable access. So we also encourage our residents, if they have any questions and they're not here today and viewing from home, they can certainly email myself or any of the council members to weigh in on ideas or topics that we're discussing today, or of course call us at 446-CITY and share your thoughts and feedback. So why don't we jump into this right away, if you don't mind, and begin talking about Visioning 2040. I mean, it's really hard to believe that we've been a number of years now into our Visioning 2030 plan, and it's really paid some really unbelievable dividends for the city. And visioning is so important. And when I think of visioning, visioning is really a step above strategic planning, if there is such a thing. Strategic planning is really important, but visioning is really the high-level stuff, and that's what Visioning 2030 brought to us. So why don't we take a look at the next screen and jump into this. When we developed our Visioning 2030 plan a number of years ago, it was centered on quality of life, amenities, community growth, stability, core services, and technology. And those are kind of the overarching guiding lights. And if we can go to the next slide, Megan. Okay, so many of you know this by now, but I wanted to reiterate the importance of our Visioning 2030 plan and the actual vision statement. And this statement seems so simple. It seems like, well, we could have done this in a matter of an hour or so. But in reality, it took us about a year to come up with our Visioning 2030 statement and the 7 guiding principles, which I'm going to show you shortly. But I want to read this because we agonized over this, and the community weighed in on this. We had numerous focus groups, surveys, meetings with the community and our businesses to come up with this statement: a vibrant, inclusive, I emphasize inclusive, community for residents and businesses as safe, active, progressive, and distinctive. Sterling Heights, a bold vision for an exceptional quality of life. So everything we've been doing over the last 6-7 years since the Visioning 2030 plan was developed is centered on this statement. Everything we do, we always foot back to this. Is it in line with our Visioning 2030 statement? And then an outgrowth of the statement are the following 7 guiding principles. I'm just going to breeze through these. I know you can read them. But safe, well-maintained, and desirable neighborhoods enhanced by great schools. Great schools are the foundation, but we have to have safe, well-maintained, desirable neighborhoods. Plentiful leisure and recreational opportunities featuring fully utilized parks. We're going to hear in a couple of minutes the grades that we're giving ourselves in these areas, but yeah, I think you all would agree they're high marks. Abundant pathways for biking and walking. We've spent a lot of time talking about this. We've spent a lot of time implementing this. Focal points that are both public and private to serve as destinations for residents and visitors. Well-maintained and aesthetically pleasing roads and green spaces. When we do a road now, we don't just pave it over. We take a look at the roadway holistically. And that's the sidewalks, it's the landscaping, including trees, it's traffic signalization, and the like. Successful, vibrant, and attractive commercial centers with unique offerings. Destination for high-tech and emerging industries and entrepreneurs. So again, and if we can move on from here, if these guiding principles are what we look at when we're thinking about any initiatives or any other objectives that we're trying to put forth by way of recommendations to the mayor and city council, or just by way of any strategic thoughts that we're proposing, including those today. And then all these different plans feed into, and feedback areas feed into our visioning process, our Visioning 2030 plan. So what we're talking about this morning now is how do we transition to the next phase? How do we go from Visioning 2030? Why is it important, first of all, to even think about visioning? And then what's Visioning 2040 going to look like? But before we get to that effort or that area, we want to first talk about how did we do and how are we doing with our 7 guiding principles on Visioning 2030. And leading us through this discussion is our Assistant City Manager, Jeff Bohorsky, who is really instrumental and very involved leading the way through establishing our Visioning 2030 plan, along with all of our directors and our visioning team that was established years ago. So, Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Bohorsky.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Mr. Bohorsky.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning to everybody. There's a famous quote, Winston Churchill quote that is appropriate here. However beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results. Although somewhat biased, I think that Visioning 2030 has produced outstanding results, and Sterling Heights is well on its way to becoming a vibrant, inclusive community for residents and businesses that is safe, active, progressive, and distinctive. Although somewhat, using the 2030 guiding principles, let's examine how the city has done at turning the vision into a reality over the past 6 years. So starting with guiding principle number 1, safe, well-maintained, and desirable neighborhoods enhanced by great schools. It goes without saying that our police department and fire department clearly provide a very, very safe community. And the city has prioritized property maintenance, particularly in residential districts. City Council has recently approved multiple new housing options to meet market trends. Increased property values and real estate activity in Sterling Heights are the highest in Macomb County, which is not happening unless the city is providing well-maintained and desirable neighborhoods. On that basis, I think it's fair to say city as a whole deserves an A- on that. There's obviously work to be done, but we're well on our way to achieving that guiding principle. Number 2, plentiful leisure and recreation opportunities featuring fully utilized parks. Again, it goes without saying that recreating recreation puts Sterling Heights on the map as the #1 city in Michigan for outstanding parks and recreational amenities. With a mini soccer field, a spray ground, farmers market, skating rink, and amphitheater, Dodge Park alone is an incredible magnet for leisure and recreational opportunities. But there are also many neighborhood parks that provide year-round recreational opportunities for our residents. And if that wasn't enough, there is this wonderful community center that always makes me wonder why we didn't do it 20 years ago when my kids were young. On that basis, I think we could agree that we deserve an A+ on that one. Just incredible progress over the last 6 years. Guiding principle number 3, abundant pathways for biking and walking. I think that prior to Visioning 2030, most of the people in this room took trails for granted. Great if you have them, but probably not an amenity, not a vital amenity for most of our residents. But back in 2015, when we developed this guiding principle, we didn't know what would be realized 6 years later. But by prioritizing abundant pathways and hiking, for biking and hiking, in Visioning 2030, it just absolutely nailed it. Our adherence to this guiding principle is exemplified by the development of the Plumbrook Trail, the recently approved Sterling Relief Drain Trail, and the future addition of the Iron Bell and ITC corridor trails. And our residents' response is overwhelmingly positive. From the 2021 resident survey to the recent feedback on our ARPA projects, Sterling Heights residents love trails and want more of them. Later this morning, you're going to hear that of the top 5 ARPA projects that our residents are interested in, 3 involve constructions of a trail, a path, or a sidewalk. Another project in the top 5 involved the construction of a new park with a riverfront trail. These positive responses validate that there is an incredibly strong demand for local trails and paths, which serve as a way to draw residents out of their homes into the community and being able to connect with their neighbors. On that basis, again, I think an A+ is appropriate. So for number 4, focal points that are both public and private to serve as destinations for residents and visitors. In fairness, I think it's a little more challenging for the city to unilaterally create focal points since the private sector certainly has a role to play. While the city has done well with the Clinton River and Dodge Park becoming focal points, drawing residents and visitors, there's clearly more work to be done. The redevelopment of Lakeside Mall has the potential to be a significant focal point and a regional magnet for the city. But the process is complicated and it's going to be a long-term project. I'd like to note that our robust public art program is certainly creating focal points throughout the community that are unique. So I think on that point, we would give ourselves probably a B. Again, some work to be done, but certainly we're making progress. Guiding principle number 5, well-maintained and aesthetically pleasing roads and green spaces. As Mark noted, the list of major road projects completed under Visioning 2030 is impressive and includes the transformative Van Dyke rebuild. Other noteworthy road projects include the Clinton River Road, Canal Road, and Dodge Park Road projects. And Innovate Mound is underway and promises to be the Macomb County Generational Road Project. Now, these road projects are more than simply providing a smooth surface to drive on. Through thoughtful design, upgraded signalization, and enhanced landscaping, these major road projects achieved the standard of aesthetically pleasing. So on that one, I think we give ourselves an A for now. But again, roads constantly need repair, but I think we've established the guidelines that's going to provide for successful future roads. Number 6, successful, vibrant, and attractive commercial centers with unique offerings. The city has worked incredibly hard at upgrading commercial centers wherever opportunity presented itself. Notable examples include the Kroger Marketplace that replaced a large vacant Kmart at 18 Mile Road in DeQuinder. Infill projects with commercial uses continue to be very active in the city. The Office of Planning has done an incredible job getting better quality buildings and enhanced landscaping. The big impact sites are obviously the North Van Dyke Corridor and Lakeside Mall, both of which qualify as transformative projects. As you know, the city has invested an incredible amount of time and resources at researching, studying, planning, and preparing for the successful revitalization of these centers. Again, a lot of work has been done, but I think it's fair to give ourselves an A- on that one. So let's look at the final point. Destination for high-tech and emerging industries and entrepreneurs. This was a priority, obviously, back in 2015, and I think we all can agree it's an important objective in the future. This is an area where the city can create an environment for success, but there are many market factors that will determine success or failure. The city does have a lot of economic development successes. The incredibly low vacancy rate in Sterling Heights attests to the fact that this is a city that has a vibrant industrial sector. As for high-tech and emerging industries and entrepreneurs, you will hear later this morning from April Boyle, the new Senior Advisor for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Velocity. April will outline the process for a new strategic plan and a renewed focus on entrepreneurial services. There is not another municipality in Macomb County that is so directly and actively nurturing these emerging businesses. On that one, I think fair to say we've given it a B+. Again, a lot of effort, time, resources, but again, that one you're always going to have to be working at diligently. So overall, I think it's fair to say we've given ourselves pretty good grades. I know it's subjective, and there's probably some that would go higher and some that would go lower with some of these grades. But I think the question is, why is there a need for Visioning 2040? Why don't we just stay the course? For me, I think there are a few very critical reasons to recommit to visioning and strategic planning for the city. The first is to navigate the threats. If the 21st century has taught us anything, it's to be prepared. From the Great Recession to the current global pandemic, the icebergs that threaten the course we've charted for Sterling Heights are large and fully capable of sinking the best of organizations. While a strategic plan and visioning isn't going to eliminate these threats, I'm convinced it'll help you to overcome them. The vision and guiding principles have made us a stronger, better, and more focused organization. Now is not the time to abandon the visioning process. For my final point, I'd like to talk about opportunity. I wanted to conclude on a positive note, and I want to say that each person at this table has, to some degree, played a role in transforming Sterling Heights over the past 6 years, from a city that used to promote itself as a cheap place to live into a city that has recently been voted a best place for millennials, a city that's renowned for award-winning public parks and recreational opportunities and programming, a city that's lauded for concerts in the park and Sterling Fest, a community that is a destination for many seeking a welcoming place to call home. You should all be very proud. This positive transformation is happening because we collectively committed to changing the outcome for Sterling Heights, rather than accepting the fate of so many declining suburbs. Let's recommit to visioning as the means to a better future. So as we turn to focus on Visioning 2040, I'd like to leave you with this quote from the author for The Love of Cities, the best book on placemaking. No one ever fell in love with a city because they fixed the potholes. We fall in love with a place because of some emotional connection, often a small and seemingly insignificant thing that makes us smile, that speaks to our hearts and appeals to our higher nature. Mark, that concludes my comments this morning, and I'll give the floor back to you.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, we'd like to continue on and begin thinking about Visioning 2040. Before we do that, by the way, I did appeal to Jeff to change all the grades to A+, but it didn't work. To be fair, though, the point is, the reason we went through the report card process is we want everyone to know that when we go through these processes, we don't put these plans on the shelf and just check the box that we did it. Our challenge and what we do as an administration and as a council is we get it done. You know, when we go through these planning processes, we then implement them, and that's the key. So to begin thinking about 2040, we're not going to get it done here this morning. We're just sowing the seeds because it's going to take the next year with engagement in the community and businesses and residents to really bring back something meaningful to City Council, perhaps at your next strategic planning session next year. But we want to start thinking about it, and it starts right here. So we're really pleased to introduce this morning a facilitator with Strategiz, and that is Becky Davenport. Becky was one of the founding members of Strategiz, and Strategiz was organized to bring best-in-class strategic planning, executive coaching, and operational consulting to organizations. Strategiz has supported Metro Detroit organizations over the past 9 years. That includes Samaritan Center, M1 Rail, Detroit Public Television, and the TCF Center, just to name a few. Becky has an MBA from the University of Colorado and a Bachelor of Science from the University of Texas. Becky is an accredited peer-to-peer facilitator from the Edward Lowe Foundation. So we're really glad that Becky's joined us this morning to lead us through this section of our strategic planning.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
We're going to have some fun for the next 45, 50 minutes or so, okay? I'm really pleased to be here today. Thank you for the introduction, Mark. I have had the great pleasure of working in strategic planning really in the Metro Detroit area since 2000. So if I start counting back to then, it's 22 years. I started with my first business partner, who's actually no longer with us at all on this earth, and joined forces with my current partner, Al Herback, almost 9-10 years ago. Had the great pleasure of facilitating conversations, strategic planning with both large and small organizations. I have been a part of the TCF Center, now Huntington Place, if you've heard. They have a new name again, Huntington Place Center, since it was formed in 2009. I've done a lot of work with Downtown Detroit Partnership. They are leaders in both managing public spaces. I think that's not a factoid that's known to everyone. They do campus marshes and all the major downtown public spaces, as well are responsible for the business improvement zone downtown, keeping Detroit clean and safe. Smaller groups, Ruth Ellis Center, Detroit Public Theater. So it's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate being able to support the work of great organizations and municipalities such as the city of Sterling Heights. Why do we want to do strategic planning? Both Mark and Jeff really teed this up for me, but it's so important that you have a vision. Without a roadmap, without a plan, you're probably not ever going to get there. I'm going to play off Jeff. One of my favorite quotes is from Wayne Gretzky. You want to skate where the puck is going, not where it is today. So you need to know where it's going to be in the future. Obviously, it is a moving target. The world is always changing, as the pandemic has really reinforced for us. It's unpredictable. But having a strategic plan and a vision ensures that you've got that focus. My 3 favorite words for everyone in strategic planning and really just in my consulting practice as a whole is focus, focus, focus. Think about what it is we want to do and stay on course. That's not to say that we don't want to be considering everything else that's going on as the world is changing around us, but we want to continue to remind ourselves what our mission is, what our focus is. I love your guiding principles. That gives you that focus. So that we are able to really achieve those great results. So with that, how many of you participated in Visioning 2030 here? Quite a few hands. Awesome. Strategic planning at other organizations? A few other hands. Okay. I hope you have found, I think it can be a lot of fun. The visioning work is the hardest, though. It really is. I think visioning, dreaming, thinking about what the future can look like, not just what it looks like today, is some of the really most challenging and can be the most rewarding part of the strategic planning process. I also applaud the fact that when you did your Visioning 2030, you did a lot of listening, and you continue to listen to the community. That's key. That's a key foundation to any strategic planning process. So today we're gonna listen to all the people around this table. We're gonna kind of tee things up, hopefully get you excited about it, and there will be lots of listening to come as the process is informed and you work through it in a very deliberate and thoughtful process. So with that, we're going to just tee up a couple of, trying to figure out which way I should go, Megan, here. Okay, we can go to next. We're going to tee up a couple of slides and thoughts to frame the conversation on what Sterling Heights might look like in 2040, 2045. Population-wise, the SIMCOG predictions show a population increase of about 2.4%. Really interesting part to me is when we look down here, populations are down 0 to 64. We know it's an aging population. I'm a part of that baby boomer generation. I know what's going on there. 65, 84 up, 10%. 85, 150%. Huge numbers that are going to impact and shift our thinking about what our communities look like, how we need to serve the changing demographics of our population. I think it's also really critical to think about Sterling Heights is you guys all know this, the 4th largest city in the state, right? I'm not sure everybody knows that, but it's an awesome, I think, place to be, position to be in the state and in the Metro Detroit area. So, I would encourage you to think about your role in Metro Detroit, your ability to be a thought leader and to really change the conversations and to be a part of what southeastern Michigan looks like. I also think it's important that we look towards changes in not only our resident population, but our businesses, our services, whether it's restaurants, it's retail, what are people looking for? We know people are eating out more, they're shopping online. How are all these trends changing? And what does that mean for Sterling Heights in 2040? Next. This distills some of the trends that are emanating from all of these changes. And we distilled this from a Deloitte Insights report on urban trends. A lot of these you see throughout the literature, and this isn't necessarily inclusive or exclusive, inclusive. There's probably some other stuff going on. That's what I'm trying to say. But these are 8 key trends that we think are important for consideration as we look towards the future. The 15-minute city is something that we see and read a lot about. And it's really reflects cities being designed in a way that amenities and most services are within a 15-minute walking or cycling distance, creating a new neighborhood approach. And that's something different than the suburbia of yesterday, right? It really is a change. And I think that aging demographics is even going to motivate and require that accessibility to services in a very small area. Green public spaces, and you guys have done an awesome job with that in the city of Sterling Heights. More and more important. I'll share a little factoid. I did live in Chicago for a number of years, right downtown, although I've been in the Metro Detroit area for most of the last 35. But I realized living right downtown, and I still spend a lot of time there, that the green spaces, and those of you that have visited Chicago, the great, what Daniel Burnham designed on the lakefront in Chicago really contributes to the quality of life if you're a downtown resident in a high-rise building. It makes a huge difference. And as we look at cities being more walkable, that outside space is so critical because people don't have that acre yard or whatever. I don't know who has an acre yard, but anyway, that big backyard. So it can really make a significant difference in the quality of lives. It's cities planned and designed for people with green streets, new corridors, and public spaces as the centers of social life. Smart health communities. Health has been at the top of our radar screen for the last couple of years, obviously, and in many ways. And as cities really look at developing healthcare ecosystems that are focused not only on diagnosing and treating illnesses, but really supporting early intervention, healthy lifestyles, and leveraging digital technologies in a way that, again, provide access to people that may or may not be physically able to participate in different things. So it's really leveraging everything that we have at our fingertips to deliver a healthy lifestyle. Inclusive services and planning. Inclusivity, as we all know, diversity, equity, inclusion have been at the top of the conversations for most organizations over the past, for a long time, but particularly in the last 18 months. And cities are evolving to make sure that they have inclusive services that provide accessibility, fighting inequalities, whether that's for housing, infrastructure, equal rights, and participation, as well as jobs and opportunities. An innovation-driven ecosystem, and I know we're going to hear more about this later this morning, but really ensuring that cities attract talent, enable creativity, and encourage disruptive thinking, developing themselves as an innovative model approach, and a combination of physical and digital elements. We live in a society that's changing dramatically. Technology has changed all of our lives in ways that we probably never imagined, and I anticipate that will continue. Hyper-local economy, we hear a lot about local sourced, farm to table. It's a much really broader concept, even than that, where cities adopt circular models based on a healthy circulation of resources, principles of sharing, reusing, and restoration, and producing and delivering local. Something that creates, I think, excitement, a sense of community, and can drive economic development. Sustainability, another key concept that's really important to us and to our planet, looking at sustainable buildings and infrastructure, as cities support this, optimizing energy consumption and the use and management of resources in buildings that utilize wastewater and energy. And then last but not least, this is really one of my favorite ones, and you guys are embracing this when you looked at your scorecard, but it's really automated city operations, technology-driven, and data-driven planning and decision-making. Again, whether it's listening to our community, looking at results, ensuring that our decisions are informed by the data, and that we try to really embrace that data and not just take the anecdotal information, because sometimes the data can be compelling, and sometimes the data tells us something that we didn't we didn't necessarily see or assume. Any trends that you would like to, other trends you'd like to include? Okay, now you're gonna have to do some work, okay? We're gonna do a little Slido. And Melanie's gonna help explain. Next, here we go.
Did you want to pass out the,
Yes,
Definition sheets?
yes, thank you. We are going to, just in case you need them, we have the definitions of these trends on these. Yep.
Then you type in that number.
On these just for a little assist. And you can use this QR code right here with your phone to access Slido.
so yeah, you can go into Slido one of two ways. You can either use the QR code, or you can simply open up your browser and go to slido.com and enter that 6-digit code 976200. In this first poll, we're going to rank those urban trends that Becky just talked about. There's a little radio button or a little circle to the left of each one of the trends. And the first one you select, the first one you click on will be your number one, which is what you think is the most important trend in terms of their importance and impact on the future of Sterling Heights. And you'll keep on clicking until you go all the way through to the last one, which will be your number 8, or what you feel is the least important. If you get done clicking all the buttons and you decide that you misranked something and you want to change it, all you have to do is press and hold on that trend, and then you can slide your finger up or down, and it will rearrange your ranking for you. And as soon as we're going to give everybody a few minutes to do that, and as soon as everybody's done, we'll show the results from the room.
This is going to be real-time results here. I'm so excited. We have 6 responses in. I feel like the auctioneer up here. Okay.
Good one.
We need some music. Da, da, da.
11? You can see the little counter up here in the corner.
And when you're done with this poll, there's going to be a second one, so you can just leave that browser open, because as soon as we move to the second poll, it's going to automatically bring up that second poll for you, so you don't have to log back in.
I think that's it. Is everyone done?
Mm-hmm.
All good?
Yep.
Okay, here we are. Voila.
Green public spaces.
Number 1, green public spaces, followed closely by the 15-minute city, inclusive services and planning, sustainable buildings and infrastructure, automated city operations and data-driven planning, smart health communities, innovation-driven ecosystem, a hyperlocal economy, and number 8,
I think it says 2-7.
oh, they were tied, 7-7, thank you, Megan. Innovation-driven ecosystem and hyperlocal economy, 7 and 8. Awesome. Surprising or what you expected? I think it makes some sense. Comments? Yes.
I think it's a little surprising, actually. Green public spaces, we're very proud of them, but it's nice to see, well, and I know that we're a bit of our own little microcosm of society, but we do really appreciate our green public spaces. On the other hand, thought that smart health communities was most important because I'm a nurse, so we all have our own interpersonal issues, so,
Oh, it comes up on.
thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Other comments or thoughts? We will be saving this data and incorporating it in, and I think, again, collecting additional input and thoughts on urban trends and what's most important here as we move forward. So thank you, and keep your Slido open because we got one more coming. Next. I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework for strategic planning, and then we're going to spend a few minutes getting your input on the strengths, challenges, opportunities, and threats that you see for the city of Sterling Heights. But I just wanted to frame it a little bit so that you understand kind of I think the bigger picture of how this process, this strategic planning process works. And at the top are those big, hairy, audacious goals, and that's the vision. That's your Vision 2040. I did not make up big, hairy, audacious goals or BHAGs. That's a Jim Collins term, author of many great business books, including Good to Great. So those BHAGs, and I have some clients that love the term BHAGs, and others are like, oh, please, can we just call it long-term goals? So we're really flexible there. But those BHAGs are at the top. That's what drives you. The next layer are strategic initiatives, and those strategic initiatives will live with you for probably 3 to 5 years, nothing magic there, and they help drive us and ensure that we get to be able to achieve those long-term goals, those BHAGs. So they help us, this is kind of a building block thing. The SMART goals are our annual metrics that we look at. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Say that 5 times fast, and you'll win the prize for today. I think Kyle's got some chocolates or something over there. So those SMART goals are what you look at every year. And again, it's a building block. Achieving your SMART goals helps you get to the strategic initiatives, and that enables you to achieve those long-term goals. All of this work, particularly the SMART goals and the strategic initiatives, provide the framework for you to assess and monitor your progress and your success. Course correct. A roadmap is only as good as our sort of current vision, and there always are needs for course correction, whether that's different resource allocations, changes in priorities. And again, the pandemic has taught that to us in spades, that we have to be ready and able to course correct and adjust. The foundation of all this, and really what holds it up, are your organization's mission, vision, and core values and guiding principles. Those all provide you that really careful focus and lens. And your core values and guiding principles also help create the culture of the organization and ensure that all of your decisions are made with a lens and sort of that gut check on your core values. Does this align with our core values? Does this ensure that we are both creating and reflecting the culture of our organization and our community? So that's just kind of the big picture. Any questions? Okay. So with that, we are going to gather your input again. Next, there we go. And Megan is going to kindly basically take notes up here at our bullet points as we go through this. I'm sure many of you, if you've gone through strategic planning, you have looked at what we often call a SWOT analysis. I also taught at Wayne State for a number of years in the business school downtown. And back in the 90s, I did SWOT analysis with my students. This is not a new thing, but it's a really important concept, and I think it enables you to look at what's internal to the organization, which are the strengths, and I call them challenges now. Weaknesses just seem too, I don't know. I like challenges better. It seems a little bit more positive. But our strengths and challenges are internal to the organization, to the community. Those are things that are but I wouldn't say you control, but they're a part of the fabric of the organization. Opportunities and threats is the stuff swirling around us. The opportunities are like what may be out there, whether that's trends, changes, et cetera. And the threats are those, as Jeff talked about in his remarks, the threats are the things that are looming out there, which could derail our plans. And the best way to avoid that happening is what? Just to know that they're there, right? Because if we know they're there, and basically with this chart, you want to, maximize your strengths, minimize your challenges or your weaknesses, take advantage of the opportunities, and ensure that you're ready to address and counter the threats. So it kind of gives you that big framework. So with that, and we hope everyone will share a voice here, and I think all the mics are live, right, Kyle? Let's start with strengths. This is a good, fun one, right? Because this is the positive stuff. What's working well? What do you love about the organization? What's strong? What are your successes?
I've got one. The team here is really dedicated. I mean, everybody around the room is extremely hardworking, puts in a ton of effort and hours to get any task done. So I think collaboration and teamwork amongst our group is really strong.
Awesome. I love it. That's a great start. Right here?
I was going to say leadership
Okay.
on every, on all levels.
On all levels. Thank you. That's great.
I would say innovation too. I mean, I think there's room for improvement on innovation, but I don't think we would be where we're at in 2021 had we not committed to innovation and trying to take chances. It's always risky in government to take chances, but the payoffs are huge if you succeed.
Great.
I think also our leadership's dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay.
We know that it's important, that inclusion is important, but our leadership at all levels is really committed to it.
Thank you.
Is that a strength or a challenge, though? I mean, I'm looking around this room right now. We have over 20 people in here. 10% of our population is African-American, for example, and there's not one African-American person in this room. So I don't know if it's a strength. I think it's a challenge.
I will suggest that it could be both. I think, and often that this is a great example of something that can be both a strength. We're doing some good things about it, but it's still a challenge for it. So Megan, let's go ahead and put it on both.
I think to
Quadrants.
piggyback off of this, we have the desire to be relevant, not as a challenge, but as a strength, which would then help us to improve our DEI.
Okay.
So,
Good answer.
yeah.
Thank you.
I'd say, excuse me, fiscal responsibility.
Okay. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to offer a motivation to achieve.
Okay.
Nobody here likes to sit pat with what we have going on. We like to continue to do better and just achieve more.
Okay. Love it.
I would add forward thinking. I think the organization is really thought of throughout the state as a forward-thinking municipality. And, I attribute that to the mayor's city council, and Councilman Koski can speak to this. Over the years, we've been laser-focused on strategic planning and visioning, and these are the results. That you just build on your strengths when you're able to do that. So we have a good reputation of being forward-thinking for decades.
I think also one of our strengths is that we engage our residents And also a challenge is getting more residents to engage.
Okay, okay.
I think we provide excellent customer service. We're approachable and love feedback and getting input from our residents.
Employee retention. I think that once people come into the organization, they work their way up.
Okay.
And they stay here.
That speaks volumes about a lot of aspects of the organization, so thank you. Megan's going to add challenge, employing, engaging residents over there as well. Thank you. Other strengths. I think there's quite a few we could add off of Jeff's report card list. In terms of successes, whether it's some public services, green spaces, I think there's a variety of aspects of what you've done that we could definitely add to this list. Anything else, though?
I would probably say, from a more physical standpoint, the city's position regionally, both in the industrial sector and the commercial sector, being in major industrial corridor, significant commercial corridor on M59. You know, most communities don't have those kinds of assets that we have.
No, absolutely.
I think one of our strengths is also the number and quality of the amenities that we have for our residents. You know, a lot of it is Parks and Rec, but other things as well.
Okay. We're going to run out of space, Megan, aren't we? Okay, thank you. Okay. That's a great list. Anything else before we move on to challenges? No matter how well an organization is working, running, there are always challenges, right? Because the world is changing. There are new challenges, there are old challenges, and we're never going to solve them all. I also want to applaud the scorecard and the reality. If you are measuring yourself and everything's an A+, you really haven't stretched yourself at all. You haven't tried to do that sort of that next step. So, and I want to encourage all of you to understand and embrace that when you look at any sort of metrics and measurements, if they're all perfect, what's that old sales term? You were just kind of sandbagging things. So you want to make sure that there's stretch and that you're really trying to get to that next step and get to that next level. And that's why we need to understand, part of why we want to understand and embrace these challenges, because then we can continue to push and strive for really exceptional performance. So challenges, what do you see out there?
I'd say to keep standing on our own and not just become another suburb of Detroit.
Okay.
This is a repeat from obviously 2015, but I think demographics is going to be a challenge for us. There's fewer young people, throughout Michigan. We're losing young people still at a record rate, and it's going to be difficult, both from our economy, which is still manufacturing based. We need workers. We need to attract younger people, retain them. So to me, that. Not just Sterling Heights, but I just think Southeast Michigan has a huge challenge to reverse that trend.
No, absolutely. Look at those demographics that we just, that we just took a peek at.
We are always going to be challenged by financial constraints.
Okay. Yep.
I would say that the changing economy versus since we're already built out, we talked about creating like the 15-minute city, right? Mm-hmm. In a built-out community, that gets a little challenging to do. But I think the changing economy and how that relates to how we're already constructed.
Okay.
I think redevelopment is going to be a challenge as well, and to do it correctly.
Yes.
As we move forward.
Yeah. When we look at some of the major sort of the infrastructure and the legacy, that legacy structure, and how changes, needs are changing, demographics are changing. Adjusting it's not necessarily easy. Thank you.
I think one of the challenges from my department, and this kind of goes hand in hand with engaging residents, though, is the number of different languages that we have to work to accommodate.
And that's a part of the whole embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, right, Melanie, in terms of ensuring that that's not a barrier for people, and it's a challenge for the organization.
I'd like to say having all the pieces in place to continue to go after our strengths and to keep our strengths as strengths. It's making sure we have enough pieces, the right foundation to be able to continue with that type of mentality and that type of achievement and focus.
So Kyle, kind of the organizational resources. Okay.
Yep.
This isn't a challenge, but I'm just going to remind everybody, can you talk into the microphone? Because I think we're having trouble picking it up for broadcast.
Melanie, is that me or the people around the table?
That's everybody.
Okay.
Just a reminder to everybody to talk into the mic when they're talking.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep it up here, but I'm not sure, so thank you.
No, not you.
Recruitment of public safety,
Oh, okay, yeah,
whether it be police and fire.
right.
Regional infrastructure. You know, we don't control most of our infrastructure. You know, the county controls a lot of our major roads. We have a public works commissioner who controls the drains. And when their vision diverges from ours, it can be very difficult to ameliorate the situation.
I guess also to piggyback a little bit on that is the aging infrastructure. We have a lot of infrastructure above ground, underground, and keeping up with that is also a big challenge.
Thank you. Anything? Yes, thank you.
The aging housing stock and this constant move for greener pastures, bigger houses, Sterling Heights is what it is. In those homes, people are, wanting more cool, hip, different, and you have what you have, so it's tough.
How do we continue to sort of evolve, right? When there's a foundation, because it is it's a legacy. I don't know if it's a legacy community, but it's a community that's been with us, and which has its really pluses, and sometimes that creates challenges. Okay, anything else before we move on to opportunities? Okay, Megan, let's go.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I do have an interjection from our mayor who is watching.
Oh,
so I will.
I love it.
I appreciate Mr. Vanderpool for bringing that up. Is that? All right, Mark. There we go. And he says one of our challenges is a lack of non-motorized transportation options.
Okay.
So we are still working to improve our pathways and our sidewalks and our safe paths for non-motorized.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Okay, we're going to move on to opportunities now. And these are the external things swirling around. And when we think about opportunities, these are trends, things going on that could very positively impact us, that we could pursue, that we could go after. What's happening out there?
We have the opportunity to really transform the city, especially the northeast quadrant, which is the lakeside area, with a massive redevelopment of that area. Not to mention the North Van Dyke area, which the city has just gone through a lengthy visioning process for that whole area, and we've already started to effectuate some of those plans. And all of our major commercial corridors along Van Dyke and Mound and the like, many of which we're seeing some significant redevelopment. These are all opportunities that we see continuing for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Mark. Those are big spaces, I think, too, right? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities.
I think one of our opportunities too is even though we have an aging population, as we saw earlier in the last census, we actually did see growth in some of the younger demographics. And some of the feedback that I've seen recently on social media is from younger people in younger families talking about how they, were surprised at the extra amenities that we have that are targeted to their age group. And, I think that's an opportunity because if you can kind of leverage those people and the feelings that they have about the city and encourage them to become almost ambassadors, they can tell their friends and other people in their age group and get them to move here.
Yes, I would challenge you not to accept those demographic projections necessarily, while the aging part of the population, there's some reality in that. There's a great opportunity to attract families, millennials, and with different kinds of, and part of it's having the amenities, but the second part is what Melanie's talking about, I think to a certain extent, is just really messaging, communicating, sharing, getting the word out there, and then it will build up on itself. So, thank you.
I'd like to offer one in the opportunity that was also mentioned as a challenge, and I think it's an opportunity for us to grow, is even collaboration with the regional resources that we have, whether it's the school districts, communities around us, the county, the state. There's a lot of opportunities there.
Just one more. I can't help myself on this. Property values in Sterling Heights are really strong, some of the strongest in the state, and that includes manufacturing, commercial, and especially residential. And that's a real opportunity because residents who live here know that Sterling Heights is a good place to continue to live and add on to their home or improve their home, or success begets success. And those interested in moving somewhere typically want to move somewhere where they know one of their largest assets is going to be protected and likely grow, and the same for businesses. So that will continue to be an opportunity to the extent we can continue to trend property values in a positive direction. And not that the city can do that alone. It's all these factors we're talking about that weigh into property values, but it is an enormous opportunity.
And Mark, I would just chime in, that's both a strength that you have right now and an opportunity for the future, right? To continue to leverage and build on it. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Dale. Why don't we'll let the chief go first.
Okay, and we'll come back over here.
Mark kind of stole my first idea, but yeah, the aging housing stock, but I think it adds a huge opportunity. Someone looking to buy a house, a young couple, if they can get a good price on a house in a good, safe area with schools and parks, if you give them a reason to come and there's affordable housing stock, they'll come and they'll redo the entire house. That could be a rebirth for Sterling Heights, and looking forward to it.
Affordable housing stock?
Yeah.
Okay, love it. Yes.
And then when Melanie mentioned that we need to have amenities targeting the younger population, but as your projections showed us, we need to focus also on the aging population, making sure that these amenities are reachable, available, and easy for them to access.
No, I think it's really important, and not to digress here, because we've got to keep moving here, but just a personal little anecdote or story about that is that I think addressing the needs of the aging population may also help you attract younger families. I have an 89-year-old mother that I recently moved into assisted living in my community, and part of the reason I chose the place that I did was because it was half a mile from my house. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big attractive part, again, of having a community with all kinds of different resources and services, and I think you'll see more and more of that as families are trying to be close to their older parents and grandparents, and you need those resources for them, and it's going to be a huge, I think, opportunity for all communities. Thank you. Okay.
Can I add one more to opportunity?
Yes, please.
It's probably a strength and opportunity. I know it got touched on in strength, but just the cultural diversity of the community. I think tapping the number of different residents and different cultures that this community has could be an incredible resource, and being able to utilize that to better the entire city.
Yep. And I agree. I think that's a strength and something you want to leverage and really continue to support. Okay, let's move on to threats. What's going on out there that's worrisome? There's some real standard stuff here, right?
Complacency.
Okay. That's good.
There's a threat of the unknown, so we have to accept that it is out there in order to plan and make sure that it doesn't derail us.
No, absolutely. And the pandemic has, again, taught us that, right? That we didn't know what we didn't know when we entered into this a couple of years ago.
I would say more specifically, obviously, the economy, the inflation, the parts of the economy we can't control.
Right.
And then I'm not sure if it's a challenge or a threat, but related to that, the changing job market, the difficulty, although retention is one of our strengths, it's also become a real challenge, attracting new employees. We've had job openings sit for months with no qualified applicants. And I think that's going to be a threat to not only the city, but also the whole area of not being able to attract and retain qualified employees.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen the stories, the headlines about the Great Resignation, about staffing shortages. I'm sure you're seeing that in your public, you commented in the public service sector, but as in all facets. And we were talking yesterday a little bit when we were prepping for this today about the mobility, virtual people working from home, working virtually, and how that has become. What was that stat, Jeff? Do you remember?
The remote working?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so prior to March of 2020, when the pandemic first hit, it was like 1 in 300 jobs was remote working. And now in the United States, 1 in 7 jobs is remote working. That's in 2 years. So it's an incredible transformation of how people work.
Yeah.
And if you list remote working as a job option, you get 20% higher response to your job ad because you offer remote working. Pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, that's a jaw-dropping statistic to me. I mean, it reflects how things have changed. So I think absolutely, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, the economy is always that's one of the things that always has to be on this side. But all of the issues with staffing shortages, changing expectations, particularly when you look at millennials, they really have different expectations about what work looks like and how they do their work. So we're all going to have to embrace those. Other threats.
I mean, this has been happening for 20 years now, 25 years, but I don't know what to describe it other than cooperation at all levels, state, local. You know, we're never going to solve these huge problems unless the entire state gets on board and we have a coherent plan. That's a big issue. I mean, it's even, as Barb can say, from the MML perspective, none of this is going to happen unless the state of Michigan, they should be doing strategic planning. We all should be doing this. And that to me is a challenge because Sterling Heights can have a great plan, but we'll never quite get there unless we get other leaders at other levels of government to start working together. This divided country stuff is just absolutely killing us.
So, thank you, Megan. So the threat is really the lack of cooperation, I think, at all levels across the state. And that is critical. And something, again, the threats are external things. You don't have full control of them, but they really impact your success. Anything else here?
Our tax structure.
Oh, okay.
The way the state of Michigan requires us to collect taxes, and if your demographics that you have in this past page are correct, people who are 85 are probably living in the homes that they've already purchased. So we're not going to appreciate taxable value on their homes except for the 5% of inflation whenever it's lower. So over time, it's going to create a strategic budget hole that if it does become 150%, 85 plus, we're not going to have enough money to pay for everything in the city.
That is a real threat and something to think about moving forward, and the aging population is going to have a big impact on that. So thank you.
I'm going to add morale, both morale from the employees as well as the citizens. I think right now we have a high level of morale. People love living here. For the most part, I think our employees are happy here. You know, and there's unhappy employees everywhere, you know. But we've done a really good job, but we can't get complacent, and things could flip very quickly. We're a city that's known for doing more with less, but at some point you start doing less with less, and that impacts the morale of the employees, including the people sitting in this room. I think that's something that we have to be aware of, and that's a constant threat.
Yeah, thank you very much, absolutely. And as we all know, it can change on a dime sometimes. It's something that we really have to be aware of. Yes, Kyle?
Becky, just one more for me. Really, it's what other communities are doing around us and whether they're looking to progress. If we're just the lone organization in our area, region that is looking to progress, that kind of doesn't paint the whole region in a good light for us.
No, absolutely. And that's why I brought up earlier, you know, talking about, I think, Sterling Heights' position in Southeast Michigan, their role. I think it is really critical because you're not an island unto yourself, the city isn't. You're surrounded by the rest of Southeast Michigan and Metro Detroit. And while you only have so much control over collaboration and cooperation, it does impact your future.
Well, and I think it's not just other communities locally too. I mean, nowadays, it's, you know, if you're talking about brain drain, you're talking about keeping young people and talent, you're competing with, you know, the rest of the country.
Yes, yes, those virtual jobs. Can I live in Lake Tahoe and do your social media in Detroit? I have a client that's who they just hired. So, you know, I mean, and that's kind of the new paradigm. That's the new model. Okay, Mark, I'm going to keep moving in the interest of time because I know we're running short here. This is a great list, a great start. Again, we'll continue to inform this process. Mark and Jeff will as they go through the strategic planning work, but thank you so much for your input.
Can I just ask one more threat?
Oh, yes.
Could I add one more threat?
Of course.
I think the changeover of leadership is a threat because if, you know, we have an election every 4 years, if you have a significant amount of changeover in council, it can totally change the vision of the city. So I think that could potentially be a threat.
Changing leadership makes a lot of sense, and it's something that municipalities have to deal with. Did you have something else? Or you were just, no. Okay, we're all set. Good. Okay. We're going to move on to our last piece. And again, this is something that we could spend the rest of the morning on, but we're not going to, Mark, don't worry. But we're just going to kind of tease this up for you. And as I said earlier, the visioning and thinking way out there, the 2040 is that's the really hard but the really fun work. And we're going to use our Slido app again, and asking everyone open the app and to describe Sterling Heights' success in 2040. You can pick like 5 different words that describe it, or you can put 2 or 3 words together. Pretty easy, pretty flexible, right, Melanie? However.
Yeah, and you can, so if you have more than one word, you can, you know, you fill out the word, and when you enter it, it'll bring up another blank line for you. So you can put in 4 or 5 different words.
Yep. So up to five entries. Again, we will watch our ticker meter over here on the right-hand corner, and then we're going to have a Wordle. If you're familiar with now, I don't know about you guys, I'm obsessed with the Wordle. The Wordle game, I do it every morning, try to see if I can do better every day. But this is the old-fashioned Wordle where we take all your different words and see where we see trends, where we see the same words coming up, and that really helps us understand and I think pin in on what that vision really looks like. So I'll let you guys all think creatively.
You should be right up for it. I'm done.
17 in. I think I see a couple people still working. Couple more minutes, and we'll have a drum roll. Okay, we all set? Anyone still working? Chief, are you still working?
No.
You're all set, okay. You are still working. You're probably working. You're probably really working. I just want to leave anybody's input out. Okay, good to go. Drum roll, here we go. Look at this. Isn't this fun? In the middle, inclusive. That tells us that that was entered more than anything else. So that was the #1 response. Innovative and innovation, you see both those iterations of that word, so if we put those together, it would probably be a close contender, right? They're in the middle. Vibrant and fun, love that. Connected, safe, also is in big letters up there. Affordable, progressive, leader, growth, competitive, and then lots of other good words all around the edges. Leading the way, you know, there are some other things that when we start to really look carefully at this and put things together, leading the way in leader, leaders in the state. I think we've got lots of thought leader down here, which is one of my favorites. I think we've got lots of, again, different sort of iterations that when we put those together, lift some of those thoughts up. Solid leadership over there to the right.
I just want to comment on it.
Thank you. Any surprises here, thoughts, reflections?
I think it's a play on what we're already doing. Certainly it's kind of 2030 part 2.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah. No, I think this is, I love the Wordle concept, and again, it's just, it's just a real visual, but it begins to inform us and help give us some thought and direction in what's going to be important to the community. So with that, Mark, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, Becky. And again, just for the council and for the community watching, this is a process that we'll be going through over the next year with the community. My guess is the community will, their input will be a reflection of kind of what we did this morning. I don't think there'll be a lot of deviation because I think obviously the council represents the community, and we engage with the community a lot, but nonetheless, there may be some areas that we just hadn't thought of or discussed this morning. So it'll be fun to go through this. And we're not throwing our Visioning 2030 plan out the window. What we're trying to do is build on that with a Visioning 2040 process. So Mayor Pro Tem, we're now almost at the break unless City Council has any other comments on this topic.
Okay, so after the presentation, we normally would ask if there were any comments from citizens in the audience, which there are none, I see. So I will move on to any comments from council. Council, do we have any comments regarding this presentation? Okay, seeing none, we can go ahead and move on to our break. So we will take a break until 10:05, and then we will be returning for the next presentation. Thank you. Taking that nice break, and now we are returning to the strategic planning session for January 2025. January 25, 2022, excuse me, and I'm going to return it back to City Manager Mark Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski. So we'd like to continue on, and our next section will focus on our entrepreneurial efforts in the city, and mostly centered on our Velocity Collaboration Center. Just by way of history, I know the City Council recalls we established a Velocity Collaboration Center back in 2008, and the whole idea behind the center is to foster an economic system to help small businesses and startup businesses to grow and hopefully expand right here in Sterling Heights. It doesn't have to be Sterling Heights, but certainly the county and the region. A lot of times these economic initiatives really don't know municipal boundaries, but we want to be doing whatever we can in Sterling Heights to foster economic growth. And as we saw in the report card early on, I mean, we're scoring high marks here. The manufacturing and commercial economic environment in Sterling Heights is very strong. So we want to talk a little bit more about some new initiatives going on at the Velocity Collaboration Center. And kicking this off is our Senior Economic Development Advisor. He's not really senior by way of age, but by way of experience, and that is Luke Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, and to all of the great leaders around the table that are running many programs and departments in the city. I am very honored to be able to work with all of you. I think the things that we've discussed this morning are a clear indication of the expertise and professionalism and leadership that you all bring to this community, and I'm happy to be a part of that. So this morning we're talking about the Velocity Center. And I think it's worthwhile, because the Velocity Center has been around for a little over 10 years now, to do a quick history lesson. Our journey at the Velocity Center didn't begin recently. It actually started in 2008 when the state legislature provided for the creation of smart zones. Smart zones are designed to create clusters of technology, business, research, and industrial development throughout the state. And they're intended to encourage partnerships between municipalities, universities, and business by creating an environment of cooperation and innovation. On July 1st, 2008, to be exact, the city, in partnership with Oakley University, made an application to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation for the designation of a smart zone, which we were then successful in obtaining later that year. The next major accomplishment in the process occurred in December of 2009 when Mike Damon officially donated the former Ford UAW daycare facility to the city for its specific use as a business incubator. And if you recall at the time, we spent about another 24 months of extensive planning, grant writing, and renovating the facility from a daycare fully equipped with small potties and sinks, to a full multi-tenant incubator with meeting space, event space, office suites, and much more. We recently closed out our final report to the Federal Economic Development Administration, the agency that granted the city $411,000 to make those renovations. In that final report, we indicated that between 2010 and 2020, that the incubator program at the Smart Zone at Velocity was responsible for creating about 270 new jobs. Our program is focused on technology manufacturing. That is actually a requirement under the State Smart Zone Act. And given our strength in manufacturing, defense, aerospace, and engineering, Velocity is in the best position to assist in the growth of our local economic development more than ever before. Recently, the Stanford International Center for Entrepreneurship at Duke University specifically expressed multiple benefits entrepreneurship and business incubation have on economic development. They outlined 5 different areas. 1, it accelerates economic growth. 2, it promotes innovation. 3, it can impact social change. 4, it promotes research and industrial development. And 5, it develops and improves the existing business base. In 2021 and continuing into this year, we've embarked on a marketing initiative for the city's industrial corridor. The corridor runs from 14 Mile Road north to the city's border and generally encompasses the area between Van Dyke and Mound Road. This area is an economic juggernaut based on data we have received from a third-party research organization, EMSI, which consistently qualifies the city as a major economic engine to the region. There are nearly 60,000 jobs in this corridor and almost 30 million square feet of industrial and high-tech space. The vacancy rates are low, unemployment is low, and most importantly, the economic impact of the companies in this area includes approximately $30 billion of import and export activity just in these 6 square miles. It's important to tell the story of this strength in a new and exciting way. A few years ago, we installed signage that reflects a high-tech theme as the Sterling Innovation District that delineates this area from the rest of the city. But now we are building on that success to create a narrative and brand identity that will truly set us, the companies that reside here, and the people that work here apart from the rest. On this slide, there are a few examples of the new brand identity that has been created from a logo standpoint and some of its potential applications on collateral marketing material. A major catalyst of economic development activity in the Sterling Innovation District is the Velocity Center. Today, we're excited to bring new ideas and opportunities related to the Velocity Center and the city's entrepreneurship program in partnership with the Michigan Economic Development under the state's Smart Zone program. Looking back, our major accomplishment at the center was the renovation of the former commercial kitchen into the co-working space known as the Element. The opening of the Element was timely. The pandemic momentarily forced many back home to work. However, the Element provides many great flexible, low-cost, and temporary options for entrepreneurs, single business owners, and a great place to network with others. In addition to the Element, a new tenant and a partner to this city has also moved in. The Macomb Robotics Collaboration Center, which is actually now known as the Macomb Automotive Robotics Zone, or MARS, is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to STEM programming for K through 12 partners, as well as industry partners to help build the talent and workforce of the future. As the world has changed the past 24 months, so have opportunities of startups and entrepreneurs. Oops, hold on a second. I think I skipped one too many. Here we go. Sorry about that. Let's see, let me start over. As the world has changed the past 24 months, so have the opportunities of startups and entrepreneurs. In order for Sterling Heights to continue to move its economy forward, entrepreneurship development is paramount. I'm pleased to welcome April Boyle, who was recently contracted with the Local Development Finance Authority as the Senior Advisor for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. April comes to us with over a decade of experience in building an entrepreneurial ecosystem, as well as starting and managing an incubator program known as the Build Institute, which was not only successful in the city of Detroit, but was also grown outside of the metro region and outside of the state of Michigan. So with that, I would like to introduce April Boyle.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. And thank you, Luke, for that kind introduction. Happy New Year, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today. I was excited to present, but after listening to you all and being part of the strategic planning process, I'm even more excited and happy to be working with all of you. And I hope to meet you all personally today over the course of the day. So, also, this is such a critical time for our city, but also entrepreneurship and innovation. And as Luke mentioned, my name is April Boyle. I have been working in innovation and entrepreneurship for over 10 years. I am the founder and former executive director of Build Institute and the D Hive. Has anybody heard of any of those initiatives? Okay, good. I see some heads shaking. Good. Which was an award-winning and nationally recognized incubator, accelerator, and entrepreneurship center in the city of Detroit. And as Luke mentioned, we scaled through Southeast Michigan into Pontiac, Hazel Park, Ferndale, and then a few communities outside of the state, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Bradenton, Florida. So we worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and helped to really build up the creative grassroots, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, women, people of color, small businesses in the city of Detroit and beyond. So let me make sure I know how to work this. Oop, I went backwards. We are not going backwards, we are going forwards. Promise. Okay. So through my work, I will be focused on building up the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Sterling Heights and throughout the Macomb County, with the hub being Velocity Center. Encouraging a culture of entrepreneurship is critical at this time. We will be building up networks and collaboration, which we heard is important earlier today. We have a beautiful space in the Velocity Center for gathering, co-working, events, programming, and then also as important will be our image. So making sure that people understand that Sterling Heights is open for business, that we have resources and education available to entrepreneurs, anybody who has an idea, who wants to start a business, grow a business, and that'll be important to reach out to news and media, to celebrate our successes, but also to celebrate and tell the stories of failures, or maybe we could say pivoting, possibly starting an awards program. And then developing and investing in individuals and companies is going to be really important. So training, mentorship, coaches, pitch prep and competitions, mentorship, technical assistance, and much more. So why does this matter? We've heard why it matters several times this morning, and I'm just going to drive this point home a little bit. Entrepreneurship and innovation is an economic driver. 3/4 of net new jobs are started by new and young firms and employ about 47% of the workforce. It improves productivity and quality of life, retains and attracts talent. So we've heard about the brain drain, not just happening in this region, but across the nation. So how can we make sure that our young people stay here and have opportunities? And it also spurs innovation and can solve some of our most pressing challenges. So climate change, poverty, some of the health issues with an aging population. And we have a unique opportunity in this region. One of the things that wasn't mentioned as an opportunity earlier was that Southeast Michigan is an emerging ecosystem by venture capital valuation. So this region has produced 5 unicorns in the last 5 years. So a unicorn is a company that is worth over $1 billion. And it would be awesome if the next unicorn for Michigan was from this region, and maybe even Sterling Heights. So another opportunity is sector disruption because of COVID-19 and other factors like advances in technology. So as much as that can be a challenge, it's also an opportunity for us. Also, there's going to be historic public, private, and philanthropic investment in entrepreneurship and innovation. And we want to be ready to take advantage of that opportunity. Let's see. Okay, so the next steps. We will be embarking on a strategic planning, business planning process in Q1. We have a core team of regional partners, Macomb Economic Development, Sterling Heights Chamber of Commerce, Macomb Community College, as well as others will be part of that team. Through that process, we will be, let me just find my card here. Similar to what you've done this morning and what you're going to be doing over the year with the city, we will be doing for Velocity Center. So that will include updating our vision, mission, and core values. We'll be doing a SWOT analysis. We'll be honing in on our target market, producing an executive summary, understanding what programming could look like and what the budgeting and staff would be to execute on that. And we'll be producing interviews, getting feedback from the community and entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurship is a collaborative effort and a team sport. It will take all of us. So we need buy-in from leadership. We need your willingness to participate in the process. If you have ideas, please share those and we'll be reaching out. Next, in Q2, we will be putting together a program architecture based on the strategic planning process and feedback from community, from the entrepreneurs, from our research, understanding what the other smart zones are doing across the region. We don't want to duplicate efforts and confuse people. We really want to add value and fill any gaps, and making sure that we're doing that based on the strengths of Sterling Heights and Macomb County. And then we want to update and refresh our brand and our website, and again, focus on storytelling, focus on data and analytics, understanding what our strategic initiatives are going to be, what our goals are going to be, so that we can hit those goals and be transparent with you and the community. And I hope that next year when I'm standing here, we will have an A+ on that report card. Okay, Jeff? Okay. Let's see. So Q3, I already talked about that. So finally, I think it's really important, best practice for sustainable, successful ecosystems around the country and around the world, frankly, have a public resource guide so that the business support organizations are collaborating, they're communicating, and that it's also a transparent and easy to use process for entrepreneurs to navigate so that it is effective. We're not duplicating resources and wasting resources. We really want to be efficient in how we're applying these resources. So that will be published in Q4. Let's see. So I've only been on the job for about 6 weeks. And why is this not advancing? And then I turned it off. Anyway, I think the last slide, here it is, yes. So please, let's connect. I'm still in the learning and listening phase, discovery. I don't have all the answers, but I want to work with all of you to come up with those answers and implement them. My email is up there. And I would love to meet with each and every one of you to discuss your ideas about making Sterling Heights a place for innovation, entrepreneurship, and small business, high-tech growth businesses as well. So thank you so much.
And Mayor Pro Tem, we're very happy to have April on board with us. And this is one more example, and I really commend the City Council and our entire leadership team on this point. We spend a lot of time focusing on our major corporate players in the city, and that includes Stellantis. Everyone recalls when then under Chrysler, when the plant was scheduled to close, and the City Council established a broad-based task force, including representatives from the governor's office and others, and is the only example in the country of where Chrysler bought back a plant out of bankruptcy because of the city's effort. But again, we spend a lot of time with our major players, including Ford, and it's so important because they're a huge part of our city's tax base, and that's why property taxes, especially for residential properties, are so low in Sterling Heights. It's because of our very strong tax base in our manufacturing commercial sector. But as we heard this morning, it's also really important to focus on our small businesses and startup companies. They make up the vast majority, and that's the case nationwide of our employment, 70% or so in terms of economic impact to our economy. So it is so important, and I'm glad we have the Velocity Center. There's not many communities around that have these incubators/accelerators. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank the mayor and the city council for the leadership in this area. Here again, it is paying dividends, and we are headed in the right direction with this. And it's an evolving process. You know, the needs of the business community are always changing, especially in this environment. So again, I wanted to thank April. And Mayor Pro Tem, certainly be appropriate now to hear some feedback from City Council.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Again, there are no residents to make comments, so we do not have that opportunity for comments from residents, but council, anyone like to make a comment or have any questions?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mr. Yanez.
I have, I'm sorry. Take it there. I have a couple questions. First, through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool. What are we spending a year on velocity, wages, bills, you know, whatever? What does it cost us to run velocity on an annual basis?
Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you very much, Councilman Yen, as we anticipated that question. And I know that our economic advisor, Luke, is prepared to answer it. There's a number of components. There's our overall smart zone component, and then there's very specifically the Velocity Collaboration Center.
So specifically, what does it cost the taxpayers to fund velocity?
So I think historically, thank you, Councilman Yanez, historically, our budget has comprised of managing and maintaining the actual building itself, plus the staff required to do that. That's roughly, I'm going to look at Jennifer out of the corner of my eye to make sure this is right. That's roughly about $450,000 to run the Velocity Center from a facility standpoint and to staff it. And then on top of that, for programming, we are roughly about another $450,000 in programming, which is experts available for providing assistance to startups.
So approximately $900,000 a year to run the Velocity Center.
Correct.
Okay. And then, Ms. Boyle, you must be new because you went and sat down. If you could come, oh, don't go away, Luke. You stay there. Back her up. On the podium. So thank you for your presentation. I'm very excited that I think we're taking a new path. So in the presentation, it said that we, over a 10-year period, created 280 jobs. So that's 28 jobs a year, which might be 10 small businesses, I guess. Do we know, maybe Luke can answer this better, do we know how many of those jobs were retained within the city of Sterling Heights? How many of those businesses were retained in Sterling Heights?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that number, but I can find out.
Okay, thank you. And then, so Ms. Boyle, from your perspective, as someone who's been doing this for a long time, are we lagging when we talk about 280 jobs over a 10-year period and we really don't know the economic impact specifically to Sterling Heights? And then how do you see moving forward in the future? Should the Velocity Center, the incubator, be creating more jobs, more businesses, and what can we do to help that along?
Yes, so I can't speak to the exact details of the history because I'm still learning all of that.
Yeah, I'm looking about moving forward.
Yeah, but I would say Velocity Center is a startup. So 8 years, 10 years is a pretty young firm when you think about the history of a business. And I haven't done a comparative analysis of 280 jobs compared to the other smart zones or even across the nation, if that is average or better or worse than others. But I think moving forward, we will be putting together goals. So at this point, I can't really say one way or the other, but that will be part of the process, is understanding what the baseline is right now, where we are right now, how many new starts have happened in Sterling Heights and Macomb County, and watching to make sure there is growth there.
So,
So comparing today to 1 year from now or 6 months from now.
Thank you. So So the question is, how do we measure success, right? If I'm a taxpayer and I'm looking, well, $900,000 a year, Velocity Center should be generating more than $900,000 in economic activity. I mean, that might be a rather simplified way of looking at it. How would you measure success?
Yeah, so we are going to be putting together a whole list of what success looks like for this initiative with your input. And so it could be the number of new companies started, how many jobs, how many events that we're having, how many news articles. Again, I think when we looked at the word bubble, we wanted Sterling Heights to be innovative. We wanted Sterling Heights to be a thought leader. And in order for Sterling Heights to be any of that, entrepreneurship and innovation has to be part of that story. And so that's one of the ways that we're going to be measuring success, is that people will think about Sterling Heights when they want to start a new business, if they want to grow a business. I think, again, retaining our young people. So we want to see some of those trends reversed. Young people want to stay here. They're starting businesses and families. So we're going to be putting together a whole list of those goals.
And you're going to measure that and report back on a regular basis?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Yanez. Any other comments from council? Mrs. Yarko?
Just first.
Oh, here.
Thank you. Just to follow up to Mr. Bonner, do you know the economic success of 280 jobs in the region?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Well, it should be the economic impact of 280 jobs in the region.
I don't off the top of my head. Again, I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared for that, but I can find out.
Right. You're going to do the math, huh?
I will do the math.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Yarko and Mr. Bonner. Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. I guess what I want to start with is Sterling Heights' success is also our curse. And when it comes to Velocity and these incubators, the issue, I think, going forward for these companies is finding some place to expand. And case in point, my son works for a very up-and-coming manufacturing company who used to be in Sterling Heights. However, when they wanted to expand, there was no place for them to expand to because we simply don't have the vacancies. So unfortunately, they've moved to Madison Heights. And when you're speaking of business owners being innovative and welcoming to their employees, I have to say my son's boss has to be a test case because he has made the Google of machine shops in Madison Heights, from having, a video game room for them to decompress and bird scooters throughout the building and just different opportunities, and he embraces, and they're all in different levels of internships or apprenticeships, I'm sorry. His first employee graduated the program, and he took the entire business out to full throttle or cart to cart, whatever it's called now, and then had a catered affair to celebrate. This is an up-and-coming, very young, under 40 business owner who used to be in our city. And so when we have these small businesses in our incubator, I, as well as Mr. Yanez, would really like to know how many of those businesses we're able to retain in Sterling Heights simply because we don't have the vacancies. So I think it's great what we do there. We give many, many opportunities to business owners, but I would really be interested in how many businesses we're able to retain because of lack of space.
That's a good point.
Yeah, can I just add a few things too. I want to go back to the metric of 270 jobs. So that's one thing that was pulled out of all of the things essentially that Oakland University, who was our service provider for roughly 10 years, that was one data point that I pulled out because it's the most easy to kind of look at and recognize. There are a lot of other data points that Oakland University had in that closeout report that we did specifically for the Economic Development Administration. That's why I brought that up. But they also had a number of programs that the Michigan Economic Development Corporation made available to startup companies that they would then facilitate the access to that programs to startups. So that's everything from pre-seed investment to follow-on funding, et cetera. Those weren't things that I included in this. I wanted to keep it pretty simple. But your point, and actually something that April had hit on, I believe philosophically just as important as sort of the job creation side and the startup activity is culture, the culture of innovation, the culture of entrepreneurship, the culture of mentorship within this environment. And Ed's company is a perfect example of someone who just decided he was going to create his own culture and his own identity. He's very innovative, which is very rare in his business. But that is, I think, as equally, if not more important, that we're creating a buzz, we're connecting people, we're bringing ideas together and people together. That's equally as important as the actual creation of the job on the other side of things. So if that's helpful.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Mr. Radke.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Boyle. I take Councilman Yanez's point very well that, jobs retained is important, but I guess as a business incubator / accelerator, I would say 90% of the businesses you have probably fail, do they not? Like the idea that you're trying to incubate small businesses means you're going to have a lot more failure than success. The successes will be big, but the failure rate has to be high, correct?
I would say the experts in national trends say yes, many small businesses do fail.
Right. So while I appreciate we want to create businesses and keep them in Sterling Heights, I also can understand that if we're taking chances, we're going to fail a little bit more than we succeed sometimes. To that point, you came from D-Hive and the Build Institute. Velocity is a bit of a different animal because, we are out in the suburb. There's no sidewalk in front of it. You have to drive there. It's not in a downtown. There's no urban concept available. And I would argue that probably makes your job a lot harder because if I'm thinking of a place where I want to collaborate and work, a downtown like Tech Town downtown where my friend runs it, the whole idea there, that's an exciting place to be. In Velocity, you're next to train tracks in the middle of an industrial sector where no one wants to be. So I think that while we want to get your goals in line and really do innovate, I think that one of the problems that we've had with Velocity, while the building was donated and it's a great facility, it does not have any amenities around it. And as a city council, I would urge my colleagues, we have to think about this. Because if we really want innovation, we want young people and entrepreneurs, and the first page of our packet today talks about how young people are fleeing our city. I think that we have to think about how we are creating the environment that is creating that, forcing young people out of our city. So I would argue that if we are really going to innovate the North Van Dyke corridor, or maybe Lakeside, maybe we should give some thought to putting our incubator where it could do the most good and not in an industrial sector without sidewalk where you have to drive to it and then drive away from it. That's all I have, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Any other comments from council? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to have a few comments for Ms. Boyle, if I could, please. Sure. So I really love the idea of entrepreneurship. I'm a mother of 4 young adults, some who are interested in one couldn't remain in the city due to his commitments in the military, but other than that, the rest of them really want to stay in this area and really want to be able to find their niche. So I'm very excited about that. One thing that I found that has always just been it just gets me is I bought a cup. I'm a very big proponent of buying Michigan items. Bought a cup that had the Michigan mitten on it with different cities all over it. There were probably 30 cities listed on that. Sterling Heights wasn't listed. And I thought, for goodness sakes, we're the 4th largest city and we're not listed? What is our identity? We have to find an identity. And Dow, Midland was listed, and they're known for Midland Dow Chemical for more than anything, probably the biggest employer in the city and that region. So I challenge us to use maybe part of this way to get our name and really get state identity is to improve with this velocity, and I'm really happy to see that we're going in that right direction. So that is one goal that I have, is to have us bring in, if we are just an innovation center, that would set us apart, because we're giving that opportunity for small businesses. But within that, April, I do have a request, and I would like, and I think my colleagues may support me on this, but hopefully, that in your new plan and in your new developing of where we need to go with velocity going forward, if you could craft a framework of a formal city retention program, so that we could, and that's going to be, I'm sure, very multifaceted. You're going to need to meet with business, you're going to need to meet with us, you're going to need to meet with, all the different private sectors to what can we do to maintain opportunity, find opportunity, and then assist those new businesses with that opportunity. So that is my request, and that is my comment. So hearing none other comments and seeing none other comments, yes, Mrs. Koski, I'm sorry, I missed you.
I'm sorry, I want to call you Madam Mayor. It just seems to fit.
Don't tell me you're
Chair
Taylor.
to April, a couple questions. How many businesses do you have at Velocity right now? And how does a startup business make contact? Are there any qualifications that they have to have in order to receive your services? Can you enlighten us a little bit on how that works?
Sure. So Velocity Center is 90% occupied at this point, but I would say, again, I've been on the job for about 6 weeks, so I'm still learning, that 50% of those businesses may not be in alignment with our mission and vision, which we are refreshing right now. The whole point is that the space is an incubator, so we want to make sure that new companies are forming and have the opportunity to be there and then to grow and move out. Some of the companies have been there a while, and it's time for them possibly to emerge out of the nest. So we will eventually, once we have our vision together and understand if they are in alignment, we will be moving forward on that. We also have a beautiful co-working space, so I invite any of you to come use it. And we have 3 tenants there right now. And again, that will be one of our strategic goals, is to grow that exponentially this year. I'd like to see 10 to 20 people in there. And I also just want to comment on, I can't see your name from here, but yes, you. Was it Ned? Is it Ned Stabler or Kelly that you?
Ned,
okay.
Ned's a friend of mine.
Yeah, so I've worked very closely with Techtown over the years, and really appreciate their model. They're an innovator in this space. They've been around for a long time. And we agree with you. Once we go through the strategic planning process, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, maybe Velocity Center is not the right place for this to be long-term. That's why I'm here to help support that, to listen to you, and then to go through the strategic planning process to figure out, is this the right building for us? I'm meeting with most of the smart zones to understand how things are working for them, how successful they are, what their challenges are. I love the Lean Rocket Lab in Jackson. I'm meeting with Automation Alley and some of the others, so noted.
April, can you
Did I answer your question? I'm so sorry.
No.
I think I digressed a little.
What are the qualifications for a company to get involved with Velocity? What do they promise? What do they bring to the table? How is it going to benefit Sterling Heights? How do you select who you offer your services to?
That's a great question. We are developing that right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Mr. Yanez, I believe, has a second.
Yeah, one last thing. Are you considering anything at all along the lines of like TEDx talks?
Absolutely. So on one of my cards, and I only spoke about half of what I had written down because we were over time, but yes, there's a gentleman who just wrote a book, and it's called The Second Act Entrepreneur, which is great for where we are now. The Great Resignation, many of these people are leaving their corporate jobs and are looking for what is their What is their next job going to be? How are they going to leave a legacy in their later years? So I invited him in for a book talk and a book giveaway. We don't have it planned right now, but that's what I'm reaching out to innovative, interesting folks like that to inspire. TED Talks, fireside chats, all kinds, everything's on the table. But again, we don't want to flood and duplicate efforts. So we want to make sure we understand what the other smart zones are doing, what our partners are doing. The Sterling Heights Chamber is very active. Macomb Community College is active. Macomb County is active. So we just want to make sure we're coordinated with our partners.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from council? Okay, very good. So thank you very much. And now I think we can move on to item D on our agenda, which is the Budget Rescue American Rescue Plan presentation by Mr. Vanderpool.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll simply introduce our Chief Financial Officer, and that is Jennifer Varney, and she will lead us through the discussion and highlight some of the community feedback that we've received.
All right, good morning, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, Mr. Vanderbilt, Mr. Koszewski. I'm happy to be here today to give an update on the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And first, I just want to go over very briefly the basic information about the plan. Sterling Heights will receive just under $20 million, $19.8 million over 2 years. We have already received the first half of that money, and we will receive the second half in May of 2022. These funds must be obligated by the end of 2024 and spent by the end of 2026. So there really is a long time to decide on the best use of these funds. There's 4 broad categories that are allowable uses. Just quickly, first, to respond to the public health emergency or its negative impacts, premium pay for essential workers, to provide governmental services to the extent of lost revenue, and this is the main category that we would propose for our use of funds, and investment in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. And just as a reminder, there are 2 absolutely prohibited uses, which is for extra contributions to pension funds or to pay down debt, or in addition, we can't just put it into our fund balance and leave it sit there. The point of this whole act is to spend the funds to get the money out into the economy and improve the community for the residents. So again, back to revenue loss, that's the most flexible use of funds. To the extent that you can show revenue losses through a very specific calculation as prescribed by the U.S. Department of Treasury, you can pretty much use that for almost anything that the government provides, other than, of course, the prohibited usage. And based on my calculations, which have been reviewed by Plant Moran, we can use the entirety of our funding level as a revenue loss. The main reason is because you can factor in growth, and you can factor in the growth of 4% annually, which is prescribed by the federal government, or you can calculate an actual growth rate. And our actual growth rate was more like 8.9% over the preceding years to the pandemic. So that allows us to use the entire funding as a revenue loss, which is a great thing for the city because it makes it very flexible on what we can do with these funds. So the proposed projects we're going to talk about here, how did we come to this list? So we started with the list. We received input from city staff, many of you in this room, proposed projects, and city council. We solicited feedback at 2 community forums held in October. And we also, if you remember, we had the proposed projects in the atrium for about a month. and the community could provide feedback that way. And we also solicited feedback through the website, which is where we got the most responses, was through the city website. In total, we received over 700 responses from residents. So the next slides are going to summarize the feedback that we received. So we asked the residents to rate the list of potential projects on a scale from very interested to not at all interested. This is in your packet, and you can see it better. So this is each project and how it landed on that scale. And so, I'm sorry, this slide shows the projects. So it totals up the amount of residents that rated a particular project either very or somewhat, they were very or somewhat interested in the project. And so the top 5 overall projects are shown here. Actually, the highest rated project based on that scale was actually the Sterling Relief Drain Trail. And although there really is no American Rescue Act funding for that, it was interesting to know that this was a very highly rated project, which is going to be funded outside of these funds. Whoops. The second is the Riverland Park improvements, which included a trail along the proposed Riverland Park in the Van Dyke corridor. Next is the ITC corridor multi-use path, the sidewalk gap program, and neighborhood street tree planting. So again, these are the 5 highest rated based on residents rating very interested or somewhat interested. And so we also asked, of all the projects, we asked residents to rate their top 5. And this chart shows the total number of residents that ranked a particular project anywhere in their top 5. And so the projects with the most top 5 votes are similar to the first ranking. The ITC corridor multi-use path got the most top 5 votes, followed by the Riverland Park improvements, the neighborhood street tree planting program, the sidewalk gap program. So all of those 4 were also shown on the previous ranking. And then also the addition of speed humps to neighborhood streets is the last project in the top 5 of those votes. So in all, a total of $25 million in projects were proposed. And based on the feedback received from all the sources mentioned, city administration is recommending the following projects to be funded. First, a total of $1.5 million in assistance to residents and businesses through direct assistance to small businesses and households, job training for unemployed workers, and premium pay for essential city workers. The Household Assistance Program has already been approved by council and implemented, and to date, we have issued household assistance payments to 18 local households at a total of $36,000. And now I will turn it over to Luke Bonner, who will highlight the Riverland Park Improvement Project, who will then be followed by Chris McLeod, Jeff Bahorsky, and Chief Wojciechowski, who will highlight the other recommended projects.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Varney. In 2020 and 2021, the Corridor Improvement Authority embarked on a new strategic master plan for the North Van Dyke District. The goal of this new master plan was to take advantage of the core assets of the area. The major asset in this area and most of the city is the Clinton River and Dodge Park system. This visual depicts a concept created as part of the North Van Dyke strategic plan. This essentially is perspective. If you're standing on the path right at the Van Dyke, sort of right before the underpass, the trail system that goes under the Van Dyke Bridge there, you'd be looking northeast, essentially. This perspective identifies a highly active park on the right of the photo and dining and entertainment options on the left of the photo, thus mixing recreation and entertainment in this district. The dining and entertainment option would obviously require a private operation. However, with the proper budget, which we believe we have available through ARPA, an anticipated congressional earmark, and the Corridor Improvement Authority budget, we will have the resources to pursue the public park activation portion of this project. Next slide, please. Thank you. The strategic master plan identified 10 guiding principles, 2 of which are highlighted here. The 4th guiding principle was the redevelopment of this area will include public spaces for gathering, will activate the corridor as a place for people, and will provide connections to existing city assets. And the 10th guiding principle is the vision will be guided by the best practices in planning, urban design, sustainability, equity, placemaking, and economic development. On the right portion of this slide is a graphic that specifically is looking at this area that was previously noted on the slide, the visual that we have. This area of the strategic master plan specifically is looking at community gardens, nature parks, recreation associated with dining, and activating recreation, says indoor swimming pool that will be part of a much larger project in the future, urban retail infill, multifamily housing, multicultural plaza, and bike facilities at the trailhead. So with this investment through ARPA and the other funds that are available to us, we can start the process of creating this highly anticipated active park area in this part of Van Dyke. Thank you.
Thank you, Council, for having me today. In terms of the ITC corridor, this corridor multi-use path would provide the city with the opportunity to create a major link between the planned Iron Belt Trail, which is planned to extend throughout the entire length of the city, and then ultimately connecting this with the planned transformational redevelopment, which is designated to occur at Lakeside Mall. The ITC corridor itself, this particular project would provide essentially 2 miles of trail extending from Edison Court at the south end all the way up to basically the backside of Clinton River Mall and ultimately to Shaner in that lakeside area. The city has already been hard at work engaging ITC regarding the potential joint use of the corridor, as well as HRC, the city's engineering consultants, to review the title work and other easements associated with this potential project. It's anticipated that the pathway would provide a paved surface of at least 10 feet in width, providing ample room for walkers, runners, bicyclists, and all others. This planned project does fit perfectly within the city's 2030 visioning plan in providing an abundance of pathways for walking, biking, along with being a major component of the city's park and rec non-motorized plan that's existed for over 5 years now. It's currently being redone, and this project is again carried in that same plan. This was obviously one of the highest rated projects, as Ms. Varney indicated earlier, in terms of the ARPA projects, and it's important to note that of that, there were 700 respondents providing that input online to put this project at the top of that category. Next slide, please. The Sidewalk Gap Program. This particular program, obviously the city's been working diligently for a number of years in terms of filling sidewalk gaps within the city. Obviously a major component of the city's, again, 2030 vision plan, providing those connections between different aspects of the city for pedestrian as well as bike transportation. This proposed funding allocation would help supplement the city's existing robust program and take a major step in finalizing the remaining prioritized sidewalk gaps within the city. This funding could provide up to approximately 1.5 miles of sidewalk gap completion throughout the entire city, as well as providing funding necessary for easement acquisition in those areas of the city where easement acquisition has been a hindrance in terms of completing the sidewalk gap program itself in the past, basically due to a limitation or no easement or right-of-way being in place at this particular time. Next slide, please. The Neighborhood Street Tree Program. The city for the last 6 years or so has made a major commitment to increasing the number of trees within the city and increasing the city's overall tree canopy. The city is proposing to further fund these efforts with a portion of the ARPA funds that would allow for a significant planting effort of approximately 2,000 trees, but also could provide funding to complete the city's existing tree inventory that was begun in 2021. City Council had graciously granted $10,000 allocation in last year's budget to do that, and that is now completed. But the money that could be available with this amount of allocation could complete the entire city at this time. The tree inventory would provide a complete assessment of every tree within the road rights-of-way within the city, including size, condition, and proposed maintenance needs. But just as important, since each tree would be geolocated on the city's GIS mapping system, the study can be utilized to easily identify those areas of the city where planting should be prioritized, since the number of trees that could be planted within the other portion of this allocation could provide, so that basically with the remaining money, there could be up to 6 miles of local streets planted for full tree canopy, with the remaining monies outside of that dedicated for the tree inventory itself. And then finally, the Plumbrook Road resurfacing. The city of Sterling Heights obviously prides itself on the quality of services and amenities within the city. One of those and most important of those amenities is the city's streets. In terms of the most important aspect that requires attention at this point is Plumbrook Road between Utica and Van Dyke. This 2.5-mile stretch of Plumbrook carries a significant volume of traffic on a daily basis, over 10,000 vehicles. It's kind of a staggering number for a roadway of that size. It also provides a significant, obviously, transportation route for a number of rooftops within the cities, as well as schools, places of worship, commercial centers, and et cetera. At this time, Plumbrook currently has a phaser rating of 3, which basically equivalates to a poor designation, and obviously puts it in line for replacement of the nature proposed with this funding. The planned improvements themselves would bring Plumbrook into current standards with many of the other road projects that the city has redone, including Dodge Park, Van Dyke, M59, and obviously Mound Road forthcoming, as well as others. The overall improvements themselves would include a fully, obviously, new paved surface, a value-added engineering of the road base itself, new sidewalks, new crosswalks, sidewalk gap and replacement, crosswalks, extensive landscaping, and new traffic signals typical of city projects. And those are the 4 projects to this point. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Bohorsky.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm very fortunate to be able to present on 3 of the very best projects under consideration for ARPA funding. These projects have the potential to profoundly impact the city of Sterling Heights for generations at a minimal investment. Importantly, these 3 projects align with Visioning 2030 and strategic plan and can dramatically advance the city's commitment to a sustainable Sterling Heights. The first of these projects I'd like to talk about is the development of a microforest that will serve as a model for the rapid reforestation of Sterling Heights, not one tree at a time, but one forest at a time. If I were to tell you that it's possible to grow a forest of trees, shrubs, and ground cover so thick that it would be difficult to walk through, so lush that it will be an oasis for biodiversity, and grow it in a mere 10 years, you'd be skeptical. But using principles developed by an award-winning botanist, afforestation, which is the establishment of a forest or strand of trees in an area where there was no previous tree cover, it is possible in as little as 10 years, as proven by successful projects in 13 countries around the world, including the United States. Microforests are being planted in downtowns, public parks, corporate campuses, industrial parks, and backyards, literally anywhere where there's 1,000 square feet of vacant land. And this growing trend is justified by the tremendous environmental benefits associated with a forest, including cleaner air, a natural water filtration system, a natural air conditioner, flood mitigation, a natural habitat for all forms of life, a natural recreational amenity for people seeking peace and quiet. In just 3 years, a microforest is self-sustaining and requires no further cultivation. In 10 years, Sterling Heights will have restored a natural asset that will pay huge dividends for the generations of residents that will follow us. I would submit we owe it to these future generations to take action now to make Sterling Heights a more than just a grid of roads, subdivisions, strip malls, and industrial parks. Forests and suburbs do not have to be mutually exclusive. Let's start to restore Sterling Heights to the green community it once was. If funded through ARPA, this initiative will start with site selection for the city's first microforest. We hope to make this a community effort by seeking groups and individuals interested in volunteering their time and talent to the project. Once the city is able to prove the concept through this first microforest, there is great opportunity to address other sites and start the greening of Sterling Heights. For the second project, I'd like to talk about a community garden. It is important to note that community gardens share many of the same benefits identified with a microforest. According to the Greenleaf Communities website, here is just a partial listing of the benefits associated with a community garden. It helps improve air and soil quality. It improves water infiltration. It positively impacts the urban microclimate. It increases access to fresh foods. It increases physical activity through garden maintenance. It improves dietary habits through education. It increases fruit and vegetable intake and reduces the risk of obesity and obesity-related diseases. It also increases property values. Now, it's very hard to argue that a better environment, better health, and a better overall community are not outcomes worth investing in. Importantly, a thriving community garden is also an integral part of establishing a sustainable Sterling Heights. Nearly every municipal sustainability plan incorporates access to healthy food that is grown locally as a key objective. I will conclude my presentation by talking about our retention ponds. The city has recently been upgrading its inventory of smaller neighborhood retention ponds across the city with new safety fencing and other enhancements. However, limited funding has prevented the city from truly addressing some of the regional retention ponds that are large and very visible to the public. While the city is doing a very good job of keeping the grass cut and removing litter, these regional retention ponds are plagued by bank erosion, invasive and nuisance plant species, and large debris deposits. Left unaddressed, these conditions will eventually require that the city invest substantially to restore the functionality of the retention ponds. If approved for ARPA funding, the city can undertake a comprehensive plan to rehabilitate the regional retention ponds. Because these ponds are typically adjacent to parks, neighborhoods, and major roads, and in some cases are used for recreational purposes, the ability to make them look and function better merits serious consideration for ARPA funding. Thank you for the opportunity to present on these three projects, and I look forward to any questions. And now I'd like to turn it over to Chief Wojciechowski for a discussion of speed humps.
Thank you, Jeff. Through our citizen survey and complaints received by the police department and city council members, we know that speeding and reckless driving in residential areas remains a top concern with residents and the police department. Police, fire, DPW, engineering, and city management have just recently met to discuss possible traffic calming solutions. Speed humps have been recently installed in several local communities, including Detroit, Ferndale, and Southfield. A speed hump or speed cushion is not a speed bump. Speed humps gradually elevate from ground level to about 3 inches in height and then back down to ground level, but they do that over the course of about 6 to 7 feet, so it's a gradual incline. You'll see these in shopping plazas all over the place, and it's basically a long graduated elevation to slow cars down. Speed humps are not as jarring as speed bumps. They can allow for fire trucks and ambulances to drive over them because they are 72 inches wide and the inside wheel width of an ambulance or a fire truck is 75 inches wide. Regular cars and trucks have wheel widths and interior wheel widths of 62 to 68 inches. If you look at the next slide, you can see a fire truck and an ambulance be able to navigate around the sides of a speed hump. And in this case, these are actually called speed cushions because they don't continue across the entire roadway. They're individual pods, and the width is specifically made so that fire trucks and ambulances can get around it. But as you can see in the top, full-size pickup trucks and sedans cannot. They have to slow down to get over these speed cushions. So what's being proposed is a pilot project. Streets are being identified as we speak for possible installation, and a lot of questions come up about what streets would those be. And we have a list of qualifying factors that we foresee in our grading process about what streets would be in this initial trial period. One of our first ones would be residential streets with documented accidents. That's a no-brainer. If there's accidents on a residential street, that's first priority, public safety. Cut-through streets are another huge priority. We know several streets in the city are known for having a lot of traffic, and people use those to divert off of main roadways, which can cause a problem. Streets adjacent to schools, another high priority. Streets with a documented average of 85th percentile speeds that exceed 35 miles per hour or 30 miles an hour in areas next to schools or parks. And the 85th percentile simply means that 85% of the cars are traveling at that speed or below. So we're looking at average speeds of 35 or more in that ballpark to consider speed humps. Number of resident complaints. We know areas where if there's a lot of complaints, there could be a serious problem. Proximity to a city park. And the last one is residential support. You have to have the community on board and the residents in that area to want this in order for it to be successful. Any street approved in the pilot program would have a baseline speed study done and then a secondary speed study done after the speed hump installation to gauge the effectiveness. Speed humps are part of an overall plan to address residential speeding complaints, placement of our 4 digital speed signs, use of our covert traffic data collector, targeted traffic and patrol enforcement, and our new directed patrol unit, which will be starting up this spring. That's a 5-member unit that'll be handling issues within subdivisions, commercial areas, any areas that we have problems. We're going to use all of these resources to address the problem. With that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Varney.
Thank you, Chief. So in summary, so the proposed projects that we just described on the previous slide total just over $12 million. And then again, we had $1.5 million of household and small business assistance. And in addition, we've included $300,000 to fund part-time code and fire inspectors. And this would be a preliminary measure while city administration and the fire administration is working on a long-term plan to resolve these issues. And also, we know that there's talk of the region, perhaps multiple cities in the county putting their money together to fund a regional project, although there hasn't been anything specific come out yet, but we wanted to reserve about $2 million for a potential regional-wide project. We also wanted to reserve about $1 million for other capital improvements that may come up again over the next 2 years. We have, over 2 years to obligate this money, and things will definitely come up unexpectedly. We wanted to reserve about $1.5 million for water and sewer infrastructure, and again, just over another $1 million just for contingencies, projects that may end up costing a little more than we have allocated here. So all this together is the total allocation of $19.8 million. And on behalf of City Administration, I'm pleased to present this proposed plan to City Council for feedback and discussion, and look forward to your input and comments.
So Mayor Pro Tem, what we're looking for from City Council today is feedback and direction on how best to proceed with this list. As Ms. Varney just mentioned, we have some time to spend the money, so it's not critical that a decision be made today, but we do want to get going on this. So assuming there's clear direction, then what we would do is proceed with the required budget amendments and then start the process to start implementing these. As you can see, spending $19.8 million isn't going to happen quickly. It's going to take a couple of years to get through this list at the soonest. So we look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. So we do have some citizens who have now joined us. Any comments from citizens in the gallery? Yes, Mr. Oshada. Go right up to the podium.
Hello, Council, City Administration. I was looking at the graph that was used to show the survey for the citizens, and I noticed that some of the recommended projects seem like they were ones that were picked that were lower than what I and others in my neighborhood had been really interested in seeing. Particularly, if I got this right, the retention basin, that's at 13 out of 16. Plumbrook Road, I believe, is at 14 out of 16. And I guess what really I find a little frustrating about that is that those improvements are getting recommended, and they're at the bottom of the public interest or scale, resident feedback. And yet the other projects that would be affecting the south side of the city, such as the Community Center South or Maple Lane Park, neither of those are in the recommendations at this time. And I'm a little perplexed by that, and I'm a little frustrated because really there's so much development going on the north half of the city, and it is beautiful. It does look great, and you guys have done an awesome job with that, and I'm proud of that. But by that same token, there's a comparative lack of investment of parks and trails and such on the south side. And I'd really love to see that kind of development. I mean, Fillmore Elementary has sat virtually empty since I went there as a kid, and the last time it had any real activity at it is when the city rented it out previously when they were having Parks and Rec get renovated. I would love to be able to go there. I know how much stuff is in those classrooms that could get utilized, or at least the space even. We could have all sorts of things going on there and really engage the neighborhood. People don't even walk in my neighborhood most of the time. There's nothing to do around us. And I'd really love to see that change. And I really hope that you take what I have to say here into consideration. I think that Community Center South would be a great option. I think it'd even be cheaper than like the Plumbrook Road proposal. I mean, it can't be $4 million to get that building. It's got to be something like 1.5 maybe. I don't know. It just seems, I'd love for you to consider what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ochata. Anybody else in the, yes, Ms. Wright. And Baby.
Even better. Getting government started early.
He was very excited about all of your proposals. Like the previous speaker, I do want to say I have some friends in the lower end of the city around 14 Mile. I live in the north half, so I love everything that's up here. But they end up going to different cities to do gymnastics and stuff with their children, and they're even thinking of moving out of the city because they just don't have anything down there to do. So while something in the south side of the city wouldn't personally benefit me, I think for those residents that live down there, it would be great. I also want to say, as part of the community garden, I love that idea. In the summer of 2022, I did a huge garden, ended up feeding a lot of the neighbors with tomatoes and corn and all sorts of stuff, and even did a giant pumpkin patch. And our entire neighborhood, I let all of their kids come and pick the pumpkins. And it was something I met neighbors that I never probably would have met before, and really got to get together and enjoy, people that I wouldn't have before. So I do love that idea and think it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Okay, any comments from members of council? Mrs. Yarko? Is that where I'm?
Sure, why not?
Let you start.
I'm listening, and, I have to say that I too thought that we would have an opportunity to use Fillmore and put a pocket park there, and I think that it would really benefit the residents. It also might be a good place to put our community garden that, if we had that area available to us. So I guess my other concern, it's not even a concern, it's just an opinion, that I could see where the residents in that area would definitely benefit from some kind of improvements there. The other thing is, you know what, it's actually negotiating with the school district to see what they're interested in doing as far as selling to us or selling to a developer. And you know that they've done that throughout the city with schools that they've closed. So it's not just what we want, it's what, you know, the school district is willing to do as well. My other thought is, and we brought up the road itself and $4 million. I guess through the chair, whoever wants to answer this question is there a chance that maybe a portion of the repair for that road, because it is considered poor and will be coming up on a list anyway to be improved, is how much money could be taken out of Safe Streets and how much money can be taken out of the ARPA money in order to accomplish the same thing? So, through the chair.
Thank you very much. Councilman Zarko, I can certainly respond. The challenge for us is that the Safe Streets funding is fully allocated to local roads. So to have to then take a portion of the Plumbrook project out of ARPA, that would compromise our 5-year plan with respect to the local roads that are outlined in the 5-year plan. So it's not that it can't be done, it's just that other priority roads would have to be sacrificed, if you will. I mean, we do have some thoughts and ideas at the appropriate time to talk about Fillmore, but it would be good to certainly hear from council.
Thank you. The other thing is, you know, we have a plan where we would like to spend the money in certain areas, but it would also involve working with, like for ITC corridor, we're working with the utilities there in order to bring that to fruition. So some of these projects that we want to do involve bringing somebody else in order to, you know, to accomplish them. So how does that put us on a timeline as whether we'll be able to accomplish this in the timeline that we need to spend the money? That would be another question I have. Trees, I'm all into, you know, planting trees, but I have to tell you right now, I think it's a challenge because there are residents who, although could afford to replace their tree, don't want trees in their yards anymore because they don't want the upkeep, they don't want to rake leaves. So that would be a challenge as to how we would, you know, where we'd put the trees. But, you know, I think it's a good starting point for what we want to do. I certainly think that the improvement of the retention ponds is needed throughout the city, so it's a good expense. Speed humps is, I don't, you know, I'd have to actually, I've been on speed humps in Detroit, so I do understand the concept. You know what, somehow we can put everything in place, but there's still somebody that's going to challenge hitting those speed humps and still speeding right through on whatever road you put them on. So I got to look in, I had to have more research on the speed humps, where they would go. The other thing is that you're not going to put it at the end of anybody's driveway. So you're also going to have to see how the placement of these as you go down a street, because you don't want anybody having to back out onto them in order to get out, you know, on the road. What else did I hear here? And I know I might be in the wrong direction here, you know, but we talked briefly, and it's not, you know, it's just, it was a comment about maybe the Velocity Center, you know, might not be in the right place. Is the North Van Dyke area a place that would be considered for it in the future? Is that where it belongs instead of where it's at now? So I think right now that's what came to mind, but I might ask for a second chance. At least I got it started. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Zarko and Mr. Radke.
Well, I have to say, I really agree with Mrs. Zarko, which is huge. You know, wow, I mean, this is a meeting of the minds right now. I really appreciate it. Briefly, I have some comments on the projects and then a few more things. I have to second as someone who grew up in the south end of the city, that a lot of these projects seem geared toward the north end. And that's a good thing. But for example, the first project that Luke talked about, this, trying to find it, I'm sorry, the Riverland Park improvements. I appreciate that, and I am the strongest proponent for the North Van Dyke improvements. You're not going to find someone who doesn't support that. But I have to also consider the people of the south end of the city, and I knocked 5,000 doors in this city, or I knocked on 5,000 doors. I didn't speak to 5,000 people. But one of the things that the people in the south end complain about is that all improvements go to the north end. And here we have a park improvement which doesn't currently exist, which doesn't have a lot of people who live around it, when in the last, council meeting before last, we had I think it was a 5-year parks improvement plan, which showed that there was a park gap in the 14 to 15 mile between Willow Woods Elementary and Fillmore, where there were no parks for the city. So while I really do want to spend money on the north end improving parks, I think we got to spend money where people live now, not where they might live in the future. And I think that that's kind of the fundamental issue with the ARPA plan. A lot of this is for where people don't live. And if we're not doing it to where our citizens are, what are we doing here? So that would be my first comment. I second Mr. Orjada's comments about, you know, while Plumbrook needs to be repaired, I drive it, I know it. There were several projects on here that tested a lot better, which would be a lot cheaper. $4 million for Plumbrook is one of the most expensive projects we're being asked for here. You know, Wi-Fi in the parks scored higher than that, and yet we're not talking about that. My personal plan for a park or a community center at Maple Lane Elementary scored higher than that, and we're not talking about that. So while these priorities are important, I question how we came to the solution on that. No. I like to see the commitment to trees in the city, and I will say that on public property, we should have no trouble putting trees. Even if that's a little strip between people's houses and the sidewalk, the city owns that. It's our right of way. And in a fully functional city, we require on all new homes, 2 trees be put on that strip in front of someone's home. So while I can understand residents who live there now, who don't want trees on their property, trees, you talk about speed humps, which I'm totally and absolutely against, and I'll get to that a little bit further along. Trees in neighborhoods slow speeders. The idea of a tree canopy, it narrows the vision field of drivers and they slow down. Now, we're preparing here to spend $500,000 on mechanical improvements when we could just plant more trees in our neighborhoods. It's study after study after study show, and I have them, that if you plant trees, people will slow down. So I think we're trying to reinvent the wheel here. We know what would work, we're just not doing it. And that brings me to speed humps or speed bumps and whatever you want to call them. I am totally and absolutely against them in our neighborhoods. I do not want to Detroitify Sterling Heights. You know, we don't have any street lights in Sterling Heights on purpose. One of the first changes I made when I moved from Detroit to Sterling Heights was we realized there were no street lights. So if we're going to put speed humps or bumps or whatever in neighborhoods, are we going to have to light them up? Are we going to have to add infrastructure to put these speed bumps up so people can see them? Because in my neighborhood at night, it's dark. And if someone is not paying attention or not from Sterling Heights and they ram one of these things, are we then on the insurance liability cost for them damaging their vehicle? I know that in Michigan you're supposed to put a sign before the speed hump so that it's notified to people. But, you know, I know that when I drive around Detroit and I drive over these speed bumps, they're loud. And I wouldn't want to live outside of a house where someone's going over these things at all hours and then zipping away, because in Detroit, when I observe them, people go over the hump and then they floor the gas because they've been slowed down by this speed hump. So I think these would negatively affect the quality of life. They'll also slow down emergency services. Now look, you can say that, you know, if we hit them directly, perfectly right, they're not going to slow down an ambulance because the wheelbase is too big, or a fire truck. But at the end of the day, I think people are careful drivers. And if I knew if I was running up on a speed hump, even if I was the best fire engine operator in the whole state, I'm probably going to slow down. And we pride ourselves on fast response times to emergencies. And if this slows us down, I'll be honest, it's just unbelievable to me. So I am totally against that. I think we need to go back to the drawing board in some of these projects. Plumbrook needs to be fixed, but who benefits from Plumbrook? Now, the city traffic will benefit from Plumbrook, but I want transformational projects that benefit our citizens. Too often we talk up here about projects that benefit people going east to west or north and south, people from Warren going to Shelby Township, people from Madison Heights going to Harrison Township. We need to do things for people right here in Sterling Heights, so they invest their money in Sterling Heights, they move their homes to Sterling Heights, they walk and act out in the community in Sterling Heights. And I think that a giant roadway improvement project, while necessary, is not anywhere near the top of my priority list. And I, like Mrs. Zarko, I reserve the right to comment again if I hear anything interesting. That's all I have, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Mr. Yanez.
Yeah. So I guess we're getting regional and colloquial here because I live on Plumbrook, and it definitely needs to be replaced. And it's not just me and my neighbors, it's the school buses that go up and down the street. That's almost 2 miles worth of road. That is a disaster from Utica Road to 17 Mile Road. There's not a good spot in that entire road, the entire length, and it's long overdue. And it has very little to do with people driving through Sterling Heights. These are Sterling Heights residents that use that road every single day, and that road deserves to be replaced. So I'll just make that comment. I wasn't going to start with that, but well, thank you, Mr. Radke, for spurring that comment out of me. So, I just want to say that, first of all, these ARPA funds, this is not some gift from Washington, D.C. These are our tax dollars that deserve to be brought back here. And I'm glad that they're here, but somehow I feel like people expect us to appreciate this gift that was given to us. And it's our tax dollars, so I'm glad they're back. So one of the things as I'm looking at all these projects is the cost of the project. But what was highlighted the last meeting when we talked about the bike trail or the pathway at Freedom Hill was the cost to maintain it. And one of the things that we don't see is what is going to be the cost to maintain all these projects over the years. So $17,000 just to cut grass on the trail that's only a half a mile long at Freedom Hill. What's going to cost to maintain the trail that goes through the ITC corridor? I think that's a great idea. What we really have a problem, we still have a problem with our city being connected and being able to move people north and south, pedestrians, on bicycles, walking, running, jogging, I think is a great asset to the city. But what I want to know as someone who helps approve the budget here is what it's going to cost to maintain that on an annual basis. How much are the taxpayers paying to maintain that? So that's one of the things I'd like to know. I don't know if anybody can answer this question, but I would like to know, what does job training look like? What are we proposing to do when it comes to job training? Are we just giving grants to send people off to community college? Are we actually doing something with the schools? What does job training look like? I think it's a great idea. I just want to know what it looks like. We use all these amenities to attract people to Sterling Heights. And again, I brought this up at our last meeting when we were talking about the Freedom Hill Path and the Iron Bell Trail. We attract people to Sterling Heights, but are we sure that we are spurring economic development or economic activity from people that don't live in Sterling Heights? So they come here, use our park, and then go home and eat lunch or go home and have dinner, or do they stop at a restaurant that's not in Sterling Heights? Are we proposing having signage to help direct people to a local establishment? The idea of an app has been brought up and so forth. So getting people here is great. Are they moving here? Are they spending their money here? Are they going to local restaurants, shopping here? That's the question I have in regards to some of these projects that will attract people from outside of Sterling Heights here. As far as community gardens go, I have to tell you, I've been a huge fan of community gardens for a long, long time. I've been talking about them since I've been on city council. Community gardens, there are some projects where you just can't measure it with a return on investment of cash, right? Some projects just have the impact on the community that goes beyond cash. And when I think about our community getting older and how do older folks get out be active. I think a community garden is just an absolutely fantastic idea. You think about not only older folks getting out and working in these community gardens, but then taking younger folks, elementary school age kids, and teaching them how to garden. Teaching them how a garden works and why insects are important and what you can do with the food and so forth. That's a community bonding effort, and I think it will pay great dividends to the citizens across the board in all age groups. So I think that is a project worth investing in. And as well as the microforest too. When we talk about our carbon footprint here in Sterling Heights and the impact of that carbon footprint and wanting to reduce it, obviously we need more trees, more plants to help us reduce that impact. And I think having a microforest is also a great idea. I think Mr. Radke said a lot about speed humps, and I'm going to agree with a lot of what he said. I was just in Detroit with a friend of mine who lives there, give me a tour of his neighborhood. We had to go over a lot of speed humps. My friend worked for a Detroit City Council person for a number of years, and I asked him what his neighbors thought about the speed humps, and he said some people like them, some people don't want them, and the people who like them don't want them in front of their house. So that tells me a lot about speed humps, and I'd like to learn more about that. I do think, especially when it comes to speeding, we're going to have to rely a lot more on technology. I hear a lot. We've had this discussion about the fire inspector, and well, is it really sustainable the way we're financing the fire department? I don't know that it's sustainable to keep hiring individuals to monitor our roads. Our chief will tell you, we can't have everybody everywhere. We just can't. And people speed. And I think, I just saw a report on the news today talking about carjacking. Carjackings are way up. Violent crime is way up. But one of the chiefs from whatever city they were talking to said a lot of these are kids joyriding. They steal the cars so they can just joyride. And they're stealing them at gunpoint. So I think we have a long way to go to figure out how we're going to reduce speeding through the neighborhoods in the city. And then, last but not least, maybe last, we'll see, $2 million for regional projects. And as soon as I saw that, the first thing I thought of, you know what, we donated the Golden Halo.
Thank you.
We donated the Golden Halo to our regional partners. And I think, $2 million, we need to spend it on the citizens of the city of Sterling Heights. Those are their tax dollars coming back from Washington. I know when at the last MML conference, there was talk, and I don't know if it's if there's an ability to do this, if it's within the rules, but creating a fund, a revolving fund to help to do projects. And I know the state of Michigan, there's a senator from Ann Arbor who's had this bill that can't get through the legislature, but it's a PACE program, property assessed clean energy. We have it here in Sterling Heights for commercial projects, but we don't have one here in the state for residential. And I think about all these older homes. It was brought up about these people who've lived here, and I've talked to them, I know my colleagues have talked to them. I've lived here for 25 years, 30 years, 35, 40 years, some people even 50 years. There's a lot of homes here in Sterling Heights that are not up to the level of energy efficiency. And when we talk about lowering our carbon footprint, that also means how much energy we use as an individual in our own homes. So, and then making our homes more comfortable so they don't have to use as much natural gas to heat their homes and electricity to cool their homes and so forth. And I really think that we need to look at using some of this money so people who live here in Sterling Heights who have invested their money for decades here in Sterling Heights get a chance to access some of that money to improve their homes. So at some point, they're going to leave, they're going to move out, and someone else is going to want to move in there. And the home is upgraded. That means the neighborhood is upgraded. That means the city is nicer and better. I think it's just an investment, not only in individuals, but it's an investment in the city. And I would like to see some of the money used for a program like that. And I think as of right now, that's all I have unless somebody spurs me to say something else. So thank you, Madam
Okay,
Mayor Pro
thank
Tem.
you. Thank you, Mr. Yanez.
Mayor Pro Tem, Ms. Hraski.
Yes, Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. Just a few things. As far as the water and sewer infrastructure investment of $1.5 million, I'm wondering if we could use any of that money towards our new water meter installations that we're doing. It would help alleviate some of the general fund expenditure on that project. Through the chair to Ms. Varney.
I mean, it absolutely would be within the rules. We are bonding for that project, so the plan would be to borrow $12 million. So instead, you would borrow 10.5. I mean, off the top of my head, that might save the average resident $1 a month. I mean, so again, it's yes is the answer, but I guess I would ask you to think about, would there be something more impactful you could do for residents for $1.5 million than save them a couple dollars a month on their water bill? It's just a question of.
That's why I asked. Thank you. Also, to Mr. Yanez's point, he had a couple of points I'd like to expound on. The reserve for regional projects, at what point, since this has to be spent by a time certain, would you say, okay, no regional projects, let's spend that money? There has to be a cutoff point where you're not waiting for a project to appear. And then we would have to come up with how we're going to spend that $2 million. Through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool, maybe?
Sure, I'd be happy to respond. Thank you, Councilwoman Schmidt. First, on the regional project allocation of $2 million, let me just clarify. The idea there is not to spend the money outside of Sterling Heights proper. The idea is to leverage that $2 million to obtain additional funding from either the county, the state, or the federal government, or other granting agencies, could be not-for-profits and the like. Councilman Yanez brought up an excellent point, the PACE program, which is a really good program. It should be available to residents in Sterling Heights, but perhaps we can do something with that to design something customized for Sterling Heights residents and leverage some grant funding, whether it's from PACE or the state or the like. That's the whole idea behind the $2 million, is to turn the $2 million into $6 million, but from outside funding sources. But again, it would be allocated for Sterling Heights residents and potentially Sterling Heights businesses. So that's what we mean by regional projects, just leveraging that money.
Okay. And as far as Plumbrook, I think Plumbrook from 17 to Van Dyke is almost as bad as Utica to Shaner. Plumbrook is just a horrible road from start to finish. And you know what, if this is what we have, I don't have a problem fixing Plumbrook. I think enough of our residents utilize, and our public service vehicles utilize Plumbrook, and it is in deplorable shape, that we need to, if at all possible, get that done forthwith. So I don't have an issue with Plumbrook. For the sidewalk gaps, I'm wondering if a thought was put into possibly using some of that money to eliminate the situation at Mound and 18.5, maybe a pedestrian bridge. We had talked about, the sidewalks in the Innovate Mound project. We got them to 18 Mile. How are we going to 18.5? How are we going to get people over 18.5? I think possibly a pedestrian bridge. I'm not sure how expensive those are. Maybe we can get one on sale. I don't know, but I always look for a sale. So that was one of my ideas. As far as Fillmore, I love the idea of a community garden or a park there. However, I think we need to tread lightly as far as purchasing a building. As Mr. Yanez has already spoken, and I've said previously, this is, not a one-time purchase. We have to pay and fund to fill that building with personnel, to maintain that building. And I think we should really tread lightly when it comes to doing that, because we have to look to the future on how we're willing to fund that. But I think the community garden and the ITC trail would be a great improvement in our community and enhancement. I think at this point, that is all the notes I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Mrs. Kosky.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question first. The resident feedback, it was mentioned that we had 700 responses. Was that feedback on their proposals or the proposals that were projected?
Thank you very much, Councilman Koski. Good question. We gave them the same information that was provided at the town hall. So essentially, they provided their feedback on what we had listed out. But I do believe there were some open-ended responses to of some other items we should consider, but no significant trends that, kind of trump the list that was provided.
No great
if that makes sense.
projects, in other words.
Well, I wouldn't say great projects, but I mean, it's just nothing that, we had 150 people say they wanted this that we didn't think about, So we'll be happy to share the open-ended responses. We have those, and that might be helpful to council.
I would like to see what some of their ideas were. In regard to unemployed workers training, more thought on that. I had a conversation with our new superintendent of Utica Schools, and apparently they had a project going before of training, skilled trade training for the seniors, high school students. That would be something that I would like to see the city maybe talk to administration about and find out if we could partner with them. Not only unemployed worker training, skilled trades, but possibly working with the schools to maybe help out our seniors that don't want to go to college but need a skilled trade. Our Sustainability Commission came up with some great ideas in their plan that they provided to us just recently. I'm still going to say I want to see Kleino and Edison Court connected with a walking path so that we can take the residents to the Hanson Trail to continue the loop around. I think that would be a great investment. That would also work with the ITC corridor path. Sidewalk gap program. I know we've talked a number of times about completing the gaps. The cost to some residents being enormous. Could we possibly use some of this money to maybe set a limit on what the resident would pay, as if it were an 80-foot lot, a 100-foot lot, and anything over that, we would have this fund to maybe cover that cost to get our gaps completed quicker. Because we've been working on having sidewalks leading to all of our major parks for many years. We haven't accomplished it yet. This might be an opportunity to maybe take care of some of them. In regard to Fillmore, I think that we should investigate that to the fullest, find out if it's possible to purchase something like that, how we would fund it. I know the South End needs some activity down there, whether Fillmore would fill that need or if there's something else that we could do that would give them their activity. They deserve it. Plumbrook, yes, definitely needs help. My question is, could we use any CDBG funding for maybe part of that repair? I would like to see us take a look at that to see if maybe funding could come from there so that we wouldn't have to strap anything else. But Plumbrook definitely has to be done. Speed bumps, I'm not crazy about them. I just have this concern that someone that's not familiar with the area, and it could be nighttime, and they come through, they hit that, lose control of the car, what's going to happen? So I would like to learn a little more about that before I say yes. Today we learned that in the year 2045, our population is going to increase by 150% for, what was it, 65 and older?
65 to 85.
So that means that we need to start thinking about how we're going to provide for that 150% increase. We have household small business assistance at $1,500,000. Could we maybe think about ways that we could provide for these seniors so that they can stay in their homes? I know that at one point we had interest-free loans that did not have to be paid off until the property was sold. When the property was sold, the loan came due, although it remained interest-free. Property sold, the money goes back into the fund. If we could give them some kind of assistance to help them maintain their homes, and I've talked about this many, many times, snow plowing, grass cutting, activities for our seniors to allow them to stay in their homes. I don't know if we could use any of that money for any projects like that to give them any assistance. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Koski. Council on the second round, Mrs. Ziarko.
Thank you. Briefly, I'm going to put my MML hat on right now because in a couple of meetings that I've been in the last 3 or 4 months, you know, we sit here and we have this great presentation on how we can spend this money. We have a discussion about it. We have opinions about it. You know, and we've been educated as to how it can happen. There are over 100 cities and townships throughout the state that turn their money down, and not because they didn't want it. They had no one to facilitate the process. In other words, they were so small that they could not find the means in order to find the, you know, the personnel to actually, you know, plan it for them. So that's over 100 cities. The other, and let's go back to the regional projects. The big buzzword right now is leverage and amplify. And it's another, you know, it is another project, or maybe more than one, that will have a timeline because it involves somebody else. But I think as long as we keep that in reserves for right now, but have a timeline as to if nobody comes forward or we don't find anybody at a certain date, we need to find Plan B, and we should have Plan B in place in order to spend that $2 million. So that's another, because maybe one of the other projects that we haven't talked about, we could fund because we aren't going to be doing any joint projects with either the county or the state. So that's just something to keep in mind. And as we keep talking about 2045, does this mean, and we talk about non-motorized vehicles, but are we going to be a golf cart community because nobody's going to drive, so they're going to need to get on a golf cart to go places? Because some of our streets are, that's what's happening, is to get from one side of the subdivision to another, somebody's pulling a golf cart out of their garage even though it's not legal. So, but I think that's it. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ziarko. Anyone else on the second round? Yes, Mr. Becky.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Just a couple of thoughts after my colleagues spoke. I have some questions about keeping money in reserve for a regional project. I think that Councilman Yanis hit the nail on the head. You know, we were told that the HALO was going to be a regional project. We were going to be the first leaders in that. And then as soon as we put forward the money and the vision, our colleagues all stabbed us in the back. And they all said, no, that's not what we were told, blah, blah, blah. I was at the meeting. I know, I'm looking at Mrs. Koski. She was there too. And what transpired, what we were told, and what actually happened were all different things. And then it comes to Mound Road. We were told there was going to be sidewalk on both sides of Mound Road up the entire side. Regional project. We put our money and our lobbyists to DC to get that money. And then when it came time to do it, the county turned around and stabbed us in the back again. and gypped us out of sidewalks. And now we're paying for it. We're talking about it, using some of our own money to pay for sidewalks that we were promised by the county. So I'll be honest, I don't have much faith in regional projects, especially sponsored by Macomb County. To Plumbrook, I do not disagree that Plumbrook needs to be fixed. I'm just talking about, should we spend 20% of the ARPA funding on one roadway? And while that would be important for that cross east-west traffic, this money should benefit the entire city. That is my point about that. And there are some other things. I like Mrs. Koski, would like to see the list of projects suggested by the residents. I'm surprised we haven't had it yet, because I think that would really inform our conversation, because I will admit I don't have all the ideas. So a lot of the ideas I have come directly from the residents themselves. Something that I've always thought about is our bus stops here in Sterling Heights. We don't have a robust public transit network, but most of our bus stops are not handicap accessible or disabled accessible. They're a sign on a grass patch which has been worn down by people stepping on it, with no way for someone who, like my mother, was in a wheelchair to access a bus. So are we really making our community accessible for everyone, not just the able-bodied? I also think about she was 92 years old, so she was a very wonderful young lady who I talked with about a shared use path on Dodge Park from 15 to 16 mile on the east side of the street. And her take was she frequently drives her Amigo cart around the neighborhood, and she has trouble conflicting with bikes because they're going up to the shared use path at 16 mile that goes all the way to Dodge Park. And there, the sidewalk, I believe, is 8 foot wide or 10 feet wide. It's wider, so people don't have as many conflicts. But right there in her neighborhood, she has significant conflicts because people are zipping up there. And if we're going to make 15 to 16 mile part of the Iron Bell shared use, which we've talked about repeatedly, I think we should expand the sidewalk there to make it easier so people aren't, because what she said she'd have to do is pull her Amigo off the sidewalk onto the grass so people could pass her by. And that's not the best way to facilitate, someone who is a little bit older, has some trouble getting around the neighborhood. And then the other thing I have to say is about better engineering for our roadways. We so often think about the fastest way to get people from A to B, but maybe that's not what we should be focusing on. There are spots in my neighborhood at just north of 14 Mile that have carve-outs in the roadway, little curves, so people can't zip down from 14 to 14 and a half or whatever, Irving, straight away. They have to kind of pull around and then kind of go around the little bump, which prevents them from using it as a slingshot straight away. And I think too often our engineering department and our planning department aren't speaking together, because I think we can be designing our roadways better without us having to mechanically then intervene in those roadways that we've just built to create speed humps or some other device. Better engineering on the front end will prevent some of these problems we're experiencing on the back end. And then finally, Fillmore Elementary for a pocket park or a public park or a community garden would be wonderful, but I've spoken to the assistant superintendent at Warren Consolidated Schools, and it seems to me that they want it to be a package deal. They're unwilling to sell the land without the building. If we're going to take it, it's like you got to take it all. And the other issue is that I've spoke with superintendent several times, is that eventually they're not going to give us this grace period anymore, and they're going to move forward with selling it to a developer. So I would say that putting this off for a rainy day will not benefit. There was just a planning commission meeting where residents came out saying there weren't enough walkability and things because of a proposed apartment complex in that neighborhood. And I guarantee you that Gallo or our developer will snap up that property in a heartbeat to put up houses or apartments or whatever else they can find, because housing is very hot and expensive right now. So I would urge the city and the council to move forward with this project now while we have the availability. Because too often I think we go back and say, we have no place to put something. We have nowhere to go. Now we have a place. Let's move forward with it. That's all I have, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke and members of council. So I am going to go ahead and make a couple of my comments. So first to Mr. Vanderpool, and I know that you would like, you're going to rebut quite a few of these questions. So I would like to know why certain projects, as Mr. Oshada initially asked, why certain projects were chosen and not others. So that is my first request. And then secondly, I've got comments. So that sidewalk gaps Yes, definitely, Mrs. Schmidt, I agree with you that we need to get that sidewalk gap at 18 in Mound fixed, and I would like to see a PED, some type of a safe PED bridgeway, signage. I'm not a really big fan of people having to stop traffic and using just a crosswalk in that area because people are going so quickly. And it does not necessarily mean that they're going to stop just because there's a flashing light on the side of the road. So I would like to really see that area as part of our sidewalk gap project really delved into. For parks improvement or increasing parks in the southern end of the city, yes, absolutely. That southern end of the city is also the end where, yeah, as many have said, the older residents are there. Those homes have been there longer. They are in need of possibly need of a lot of renovations. So to start with a park and a big project down there, or over there, because it's really not down, it's over, of the city is really important. It helps, it certainly does. I live right here at Dodge Park. I'm thrilled with the Dodge Park renovations. It has tremendously increased my property value, so I know what that would do to their property value, and then and give incentive for younger residents to move in there, older residents to stay with the amenities at that park that they could participate in. So I am all for that. If Fillmore is the first and best option, I do want to pursue that. I think that would be a very good starting point. May not be the only point. It may not be the point we end up at, but at least let's see what they're asking for and really start making some strides. This money has to be spent in 3 years. Spent. And you know how long projects take. So we need to get going on this. So that brings me to the reserve for regional projects. Not a big fan. I do have to agree with Mr. Radke and some of my other colleagues that the county projects may not, one, they may not even materialize in time for us to use it on this timeline, but two, we seem to be the biggest footer of the bill, and I don't necessarily think that is where we always want to be. So I would like to maybe see that number carved out a little bit, or give a very strict timeline that if we don't have a project picked within 6 months, we're moving on, because that has got to go pretty quickly. I don't even know where I am in the numbers, but the microforests. So we do have a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of, we have few areas in the city that still have trees, that are these properties owned by private property owners that are selling it to possibly developers, possibly to retail establishments. I would recommend not just trying to replant and reinvent the forest. We have a starting point to go with some of these forested areas. Yes, we did sell a piece of property on Utica Road, right where 18 hit, that is completely forested. Now I'm rethinking, oh, that probably would have been a great place to keep that area. But we need to look at the forested areas that we do have, buy up if we can those areas from the developers or the property owners before we start replanting an entire new forest. That's my thought on that. Speed humps, seconds do matter. In the medical industry, we know seconds matter. So a speed hump, slowing down, and a throughway, and I know that some of these roads that we're looking at is Canterbury and Brome that really are straight shot. Fox Hill, boy, those are straight shots. People can go very quickly. So can the emergency vehicles get into where they need to go? So I don't want to impede any good use of that roadway. Love the idea of increasing the tree canopy on those streets, because absolutely it does. The idea of it, as I said, it's a straight shot. People, you just see house and street. You can go quick. It just gives the impression of Audubon. So I would like to see that the tree canopy on the sides of the roads, on some of those roads, also increased. And then finally, so I do think that when we want to talk about re-education and improving education for those that are unemployed, the skilled trades is a great option. I wish my kids would have gone into some of it, because they would be making a lot more money than they're making right now. But different story entirely. And I think that Velocity might be a good option with that. And so I think I would like to see partnering with the schools and Velocity to improve skilled trade access, and even maybe some skilled trade small businesses like Mrs. Schmidt's son who joined could get started and get that off the ground, and we could be a really great catalyst for that for our community. And finally, always, yes, senior projects. If we're going to be an aging community in the next 25 years, and yeah, at 58, just having my birthday, that's me, that is my demographic.
Lies.
I wish it was less, but it is. So I would really like to see us, I want to age in my community. I want my neighbors to age in their community. I want my friends and my colleagues to age in our community. My parents, first thing they did when they hit 60, they were down to Florida. Thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Could never see them because I couldn't afford the ticket to get down there. So it is not where we want and what I think is the best opportunity for us. So really want to see some projects, even if they're just small funds, maybe we can carve out from the future improvements, regional projects. I would like to see some specifically geared toward what the senior community wants to see in the next 20 years. So, and that is my final comments.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, before.
And then Mr. Yan is on his third round.
Oh, he didn't go the second round?
Oh, second round, I'm sorry.
No, actually, you brought something up that,
Okay.
if you don't mind, through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool. I am curious, when we talk about having to spend the money, is actually spent or is spent allocated?
To Mrs. Varney.
So by the end of '24, we have to have allocated, encumbered. That means like contracts are signed, projects are started.
Okay.
So, and the dollars have to be spent out the door by December of 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Tight timeline.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, first, I don't want to rebut anything that council has said, because you've all raised some very, very good ideas, and the feedback's excellent. What we're looking for here is just trying to distill some direction down. I think it's very good. I think the direction is pretty clear on a couple of items. First, let me tackle the big one, Fillmore School. We originally had $1 million allocated for Fillmore School, and the intent was to do more research on that and to possibly leverage that money for grants, again, under the regional project idea, which, by the way, that $2 million could possibly be used for a number of these ideas, including Fillmore, in addition to the $1 million. That's not in here, but we can get it back in. I'll explain how. But what we'd like to do, we may be able to leverage the Fillmore money with the Michigan Land Trust, which would be available to us for land acquisition, which would then supplement the $1 million. And we would start applying for that grant initially. So the consensus I heard from council is you want to see Fillmore back in the equation. We can put the $1 million back in the equation by reducing the contingency and some of those other items there, like capital and so on. So we can get that $1 million back in pretty easy. I don't want to belabor that point because I think the consensus was quite clear. Now, we'll get to work on, what does it mean as a package? I agree with Councilman Radke. I think the school is looking at this potentially as a package. So what acquisition is probably the easy part of that equation. The harder part is the pro forma for operational long-term, as Councilman Yan has brought up. What's all this going to cost us? On that particular one, it could cost us $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million to run the facility annually. But we have some ideas there. We want to partner with other groups. We want to generate revenue from that in terms of lease income and so on. And so we would take the intervening time while grant applications are pending and so on to bring forth a very meaningful long-range pro forma for Fillmore School. So a lot of research still has to be done on that. But nevertheless, the consensus is you want it back in. The other big one, I think, is there is consensus on Plumbrook, getting it in here, keeping it in here. I mean, I do agree with the speaker, Mr. Richard, and others, like, okay, the feedback from the 700 or so that responded ranked this pretty low. But what the 700 who ranked it didn't realize is we really don't have another means to fund Plumbrook right now. And if we use the road funding we have, it's possible that a neighborhood road in their area then may have to be delayed because we can't get that road done. So it's kind of complicated in that respect. So yes, some of the projects like Plumbrook were ranked higher from administration's perspective. But what I'm hearing is it sounds like Plumbrook should stay in as well. Many of the workforce development projects you brought up that's excellent feedback. We need to collaborate more with Michigan Works, with the school systems, with Macomb Community College and other partners to really bring back to you all a meaningful plan for you to vote on. And by the way, let me just say, even though we're looking for consensus tonight and direction, or today, I hope we're not into tonight, what council needs to know is these items are all going to come back to you again in multiple ways. First, through a budget amendment. Then we have to bid out the projects, and then you have to approve the actual acquisition or expenditure of money. So you're going to have another 2 or 3 shots at these projects. If you're not comfortable with them now, you're going to have another shot when you formally vote on them in one way, shape, or form through either a budget amendment or through actual budget allocation, or a bid allocation, I should say. Councilman Yanez, you raised an excellent point on maintenance. What's all this going to cost us? Like, for example, the ITC corridor. There's no doubt there's maintenance costs involved in some of these amenities. And at this point in time, it's hard to give you actual maintenance numbers. But what I can say is with the projects proposed, it's a very, very small percentage of the overall capital expenditure. And when we talk about growth, you know, Jennifer mentioned early on, one of the reasons we're in this position where we have the luxury of spending the entire 19.8 on a wide variety of projects is because our growth was so high, 8%, far exceeding what other cities are seeing. And what that means is we've been creative in generating property value increases, new investment in the city, and so on to get a growth of 8%. And part of that growth is due to a lot of these amenities we're talking about. So that the point is a lot of that is paying for these maintenance costs that we have to incur on some of these new projects. But that's not necessarily a good response. I'm not sure if I'd like that response if I were you. The point is we'll have more detailed information on maintenance costs as these projects start to unfold. Let me just highlight a couple of others. There was some talk about the pedestrian bridge at 18.5 and Mound, and even at the ITC corridor. I agree with both of those. Those are great points. We do need those bridges. And we also have a plan for a pedestrian bridge at Baumgartner so that the Iron Belt Trail system can ultimately run through that corridor of ITC, cross the drain there with a pedestrian bridge, and you can then continue up to M59 on the ITC corridor. But again, there's another example of where we need the $2 million because there may be regional opportunities to match those expenditures. And the idea with the pedestrian bridge at Kleino is the first work with ITC to get the pathway down the ITC corridor to M59, connecting the Lakeside redevelopment project too, which potentially is going to add thousands of new residents. And then, because there is sidewalk that goes around down 17 and up Shaner and then over, there is a little detour you can take right now. The priority is let's get the path in, then we can circle back and work on the pedestrian bridge that would ultimately be desired. So that's in the plan as well. And I think in terms, I want to close on speed humps. I certainly agree. I think the chiefs do, and just about everyone in the room, that there's a lot of trepidation and concern about speed humps. And that's the whole point of the pilot program. There's no question that the community feels that the city needs to do more on traffic enforcement in neighborhoods. And all the comments are very appropriate. Yes, it's other calming measures too. It's creating calming islands. It's more trees. It's more enforcement. It's better signage. And it could possibly be speed humps. We don't know. All we're asking for is approval to proceed with a pilot program, which would fund maybe 15 or so streets to take a look at it, to get good information before and after. It's very likely that we report back to City Council and say, it was an abysmal failure. The pilot program didn't work. But it's conceivable, too, we might report back and say, there's some limited success with these, and you may want to consider it further. There's no permanent recommendation here for speed humps. There's no funding for speed humps in the city long term. There's only funding for this pilot program simply to see if this is something that might potentially move the needle in terms of resident concerns. So that's all we're looking for there. But again, we agree, we might be reporting back saying it's just not worth considering. We'll look at all these other options, or the payoff is maybe back. We're going to look at all the other options anyhow. We have to. We have to do something about speeding in neighborhoods. It's the number one concern of residents in terms of safety. And I'll say this, the speed humps are not intended to be used on roads like Brome and Canterbury. The idea is to use these speed humps on truly neighborhood roads. We get some complaints about Canterbury and Brome, but where we get a lot of complaints about safety is neighborhood roads, especially by schools. So that's what we'd be focusing on, is true neighborhood, local-oriented roads, not arterial connectors to major roads like Brome and Canterbury, Fox Hill, and the like. So I think that is all. We really appreciate the feedback. It's very meaningful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. So now it looks like we should be breaking for lunch, but before we do, because of my time constraints and I need to leave by 1:30, I'm going to entertain a motion from council to appoint a temporary mayor to chair the remainder of this meeting. Mrs. Yarko.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski, I'll move to have Mrs. Schmidt, Councilwoman Schmidt, sit in as the chairperson for the rest of the meeting.
I support that. It's been moved and supported. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for being here. We will be adjourned back at 1:30, 1:15? It is 1:15. It's 12:15 now, so 1:15.